it's about that time to get paid. Cool in the shade, drink a little bit of lemonade. Let me tell you what I want. Yo.
So we've got the human brain, the most complex organ of the human body, and, arguably the most complex organ known to man. And then within the human brain, we have the prefrontal cortex, which sits right at the front of the brain. And this is the part of the brain that separates us from every other form of organic life on planet Earth, because this is where any information that the brain receives first begins to get processed. And then that information might flow to the cerebral cortex where it starts to be analyzed. But the initial processing of that information starts in the frontal lobe in the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is where all our conscious thoughts take place. When we consciously do things or consciously analyze information, controlling the thing we do or the things that we think with 100% awareness, all of our premeditated, mindful actions. This is all taking place in the prefrontal cortex. And most of what we do and what we think is going to be subconscious, from keeping our heart beating, blood flowing, keeping our eyes blinking, even consistently taking a breath, breathing. And the majority of our thoughts are on a subconscious level. We do a lot of these things without even thinking about it consciously, to the point where 95% of our brain's activity is unconscious, and just 5% is used for conscious thought, conscious decision making. And again, that 5% of conscious thought starts in the prefrontal cortex. And again, most of the information that we receive is going to enter the prefrontal cortex first. Just about everything is filtered through that part of the brain. Everything except sound. Sound is directly received through our temporal lobes by the primary auditory cortex, which means that sound bypasses the prefrontal cortex and enters the brain subconsciously without us being able to analyze it before finally reaching the cerebral cortex. And more specifically, melodic sounds produced with a melody or music bypass the conscious part of the brain even more, which means that these types of sounds become more easily embedded into the subconscious part of the brain, which is why a lot of times melodies are used to teach things like letters and numbers, because when things enter the brain melodically, they can leave a much stronger impression on the brain because they are being directly embedded into the subconscious, making it easier for us to memorize those things and for those things to attach to our brain. And music in general is just powerful. Music has actually been used to improve the condition of people with Alzheimer's, dementia, and all different forms of brain damage, to the point where it's actually been seen to repair damaged brain cells. You got people who have completely lost the ability to move at all, completely lost all their motor skills. And when you play music, these people are tapping their feet and even getting to the point where they are getting up on their feet and dancing. People who haven't said a word in months and years, clearly singing. So we know that melodic sound, music, is having a profound effect on the human brain. And then we've got the study of cymatics, which shows that when you play certain sounds at certain frequencies, each individual sound has its own individual effect on matter, to the point where different sounds will create different patterns within that matter. And for human beings, we know that patterns are formed on a subconscious level, and that any patterns that we form are tied to the striatum, the part of the brain that deals with the reinforcement of actions, and specifically the reinforcement of our subconscious actions, the things that we do and the actions that we take without even thinking about it. Those things that are deeply rooted and deeply wired into our brain. And the more that we do something, the more that we take something in, the more striatal pathways that are created towards that specific thing. And the different things that we do release different amounts of dopamine. And dopamine is the chemical that basically locks in those pathways toward those specific things. And different things are going to release different amounts of dopamine, higher and lower levels of dopamine. And the experience of listening to music and intaking music into the auditory cortex is actually one of the highest level of dopamine producing activities that we can engage in. And again, when that high level of dopamine is released, it creates a very strong pathway within the subconscious part of our brains that attaches our brains to whatever music we're listening to. And that attachment includes the beat, the sound, and most importantly, the lyrics. And this is why so many companies use jingles and songs to sell their products, why different music is used in trailers and things like that, because that music, that melodic sound, helps to attach those particular things to your subconscious mind, to the subconscious part of your brain. And of course, this is why music in general is so popular and is one of the most lucrative industries in the world. And of course, you got all these different forms of music all across the world, but there is no form of music more influential than hip hop. Hip hop is without question the most popular music in the world. It has dominated literally every other music genre out there. And it's pretty much morphed into something that's more than just music. It has become its own culture. And again, that culture that hip hop has created has had a massive effect and influence over society on a global scale. You can see the influence of hip hop everywhere. But of course, in the beginning, in the early days of hip hop, when this thing first started, nobody saw it becoming what it is now. When you look at hip hop in its earliest stages, everybody assumed that this thing was just a fad, that it was just going to be a flash in the pan, and that it would last a few years before finally fading away. Nobody really saw this thing as a form of music that could sustain itself. And of course, that was proven wrong on a major scale. But just how hip hop started out being seen as just a fad, it also started out as something completely different than what it is now. There is a lot of debate and a lot of theories on exactly when and how hip hop got started. But what we know for sure is that the very first person to gain some type of large amount of notoriety was DJ Kool Herc back in 1973. And we could look at DJ Kool Herc as being like the very first DJ. He's kind of like seen as the pioneer of the idea of taking a record, taking an existing record and looping that record and mixing that record and, turning it into something completely different. And while he would mix the records and play the music or jock the discs, DJ these events, you also had a guy named Coke LaRock who would get on the microphone and talk to the crowd and hype the crowd up as the music played. So you could look at Coke LaRock as the very first rapper, or what they called him at the time, an MC, the master of ceremonies. Because the whole idea behind this thing when it first started was to mix and play good music for people to dance to and to keep the crowd hype while that music was playing, keeping the ceremony or the event or the party going. But All of this stayed on a localized level in the clubs, at different events, until Sugar Hill Gang dropped the song Rapper's Delight in 1979. And with the Sugar Hill Gang, it was just like that original idea of the DJ and the MC producing music to make people feel good, to make people want to dance and to raise people's spirits. You know, you had communities filled with drugs, guns, violence. And the idea behind this music was to give people something to elevate them above those circumstances, to inject positivity into, you know, what might have been a crazy circumstance. And when Sugar Hill Gang released Rapper's Delight, it transcended that. This thing sold over 1 million copies in less than 1 month. And the popularity just kept growing until this thing sold over 14 million copies. And again, this was just uplifting, positive music. People were gravitating towards it, and it was very clear that this is what people wanted. And with each and every song after that, we would just get more of the same from Sugar Hill Gang. Positive, uplifting, fun music that people just continue to gravitate towards. These guys put out 4 albums from 1980 to 1984, and you could not find one explicit lyric, one word of profanity on any one of these 4 albums. But the music was selling millions of copies, and it was clear that this is what people wanted. And during this time, during the beginning stages of hip hop, this is what hip hop was. You know, no super deep lyrics, nothing really complex, but it was consistently positive and consistently uplifting. It consistently stayed on that positive vibe, on that positive wave. But, you know, there was like subtle things that pointed to the power this thing had to embed deeper messages, like the Sugar Hill Gang depicting themselves as Egyptians and Native Americans in their only 2 music videos. And remember, these are the very first 2 hip hop videos. You know, the music is simplistic and fun, but even within all that simplicity, they're still making these subtle statements, even taking the Egyptian theme all the way to their album cover. And this is where early on, the idea of hip hop really began to start to show itself, because you got those 2 words, hip hop. Now, according to a lot of the people that were around during this time, the term hip hop was actually a derogatory term against this form of music. You know, people would call it hip hop as an insult. But when you really break this term down, it seems like there's something more to it. Because when you look at that term hip, it can mean to have understanding and awareness. And when people use the word hip back, you know, during this time in the 70s, it basically meant that you were aware of what was going on, that you understood what was happening, and, you know, basically had a full grasp on whatever that particular thing is. You know, you were hip to what was going on. So basically being hip was being consciously aware. And then you match that up with the word hop, which is referring to something making you move, you know, something making you dance. And you got hip hop, a form of music that is keeping you consciously aware while also making you move, making you dance. And as hip hop continued to grow, you could really start to see that this is what it was about. Because right after the Sugar Hill Gang, we got Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And it was just like a continuation of what had already been started. We got more of the same from the Furious Five, more of that positive, uplifting music. And again, this music was connecting with people, and people just continued to gravitate towards it. And in the midst of all of this, Grandmaster Flash was helping to push that original archetype of the DJ, you know, that hip hop was built on, out into the mainstream. And Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five just continued to grow in popularity, putting out this upbeat, positive music. Again, no complex lyrics, but consistently positive, consistently uplifting. And then all of a sudden, they dropped the song, The Message, putting a magnifying glass on the aspects of society that nobody wanted to talk about, and essentially bringing this conversation to a broader audience, to the masses. And it wasn't like this was the first time this had been done, but it was just nothing like this that it literally felt like you were there seeing all of this happen while listening to this music. And then they dropped the music video and literally took you there, showing you exactly what was going on and exactly what people were doing within these communities in vivid detail. And they weren't promoting the circumstances that they were in. They were saying, hey, this is the situation and we need to find a way to change it. We need to find a way to rise out of this. And this ended up being their biggest hit. This thing sold over 100,000 copies in just 1 month. And this song proved to be so pivotal that they actually ended up adding it to the U.S. Library of Congress. And after The Message, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five continued to put out more of these socially conscious records. All these different records opening up people's minds to, the things that were going on in the world and in the community that wasn't getting a lot of attention, and encouraging people to rise out of these situations and become better versions of themselves. Right behind this, they released the song White Lines, which was a song speaking out against the use of cocaine, which at the time, cocaine was just completely destroying a lot of different communities. And this song, speaking out against it, ended up being their second biggest hit. And eventually they even dropped The Message Part 2, which went even deeper than the original song. I mean, these guys were talking about divide and conquer tactics used by the government. They were talking about GMOs and chemicals in the food and making references to the pharmaceutical companies. And they're talking about all this over this booming, fast-paced rhythm, something you could dance to. And as you're dancing, you're also being educated. You're also being enlightened. And as this is going on, hip hop is still growing. And you got the rapper Curtis Blow that comes up, and Curtis Blow actually becomes the very first rapper that is ever signed to a major label when he signs to Mercury Records. And Curtis Blow continued that trend of releasing that uplifting, positive music while also mixing in those social messages. And he ended up dropping 6 albums. And out of those 6 albums, not even one explicit lyric throughout his entire rap career. One of the most successful rappers of this era. The very first rapper to sell out stadiums. And all of this success is coming through this positive music. And more rappers would continue to come up. And eventually we would get Run DMC. And you could tell that the idea of what hip hop really was, music to keep you consciously aware while also making you dance, was beginning to fully flesh itself out. Because the very first song that Run DMC releases is called Black History, an almost 15-minute song where Run DMC breaks down all this unknown, untold Black history. And Black History gained a lot of buzz, but it wasn't a large scale release, but it was a hit. And it started to gain Run DMC a lot of buzz and a lot of popularity. And after they garnered that buzz, Run DMC proceeded to pretty much completely change the hip hop landscape. You still had those clear, concise, albeit simplistic, positive lyrics that hip hop was built on, along with those deeper social messages. But the way that Run DMC was delivering these messages and presenting this music was something that just had never been done before. They were rapping with just a little bit of a rougher, harder tone, and they were rapping over heavy guitar riffs. Again, something that had just never been done before this. Again, the overall music was the same, uplifting, positive, informative, but it was just a completely different delivery, completely innovative. And every single song that Run DMC released became a hit. And they ended up being the very first hip hop artist to get their music played on MTV, which, MTV had been on TV for over 3 years. And in those 3 years, absolutely no hip hop. And Run DMC, with this energetic, positive music, was the first hip hop group to transcend that and to basically take hip hop to the next level of mainstream and open up the door for all these other hip hop artists to start to get showcased on this large scale. And again, Run DMC is sticking to that original foundation of hip hop, the DJ, the MC, and that uplifting music. And by their third album, they basically come full circle from where they started and dropped the song Proud to Be Black. And after they dropped this song, their third album ended up being their highest selling album. And it started to expose a lot about hip hop, because on this same album, we got the song My Adidas, which at the time, Run DMC and Adidas were like completely synonymous. You couldn't even think about Run DMC without also thinking about Adidas. It was something that they were always known for. And when they released My Adidas, the sales for Adidas shoes went through the roof. I mean, it's no exaggeration to say that nearly everybody was buying Adidas and wearing Adidas after Run DMC started wearing them. And especially after this song came out. And the influence that Run DMC was having actually got to be so large that the brand Adidas ended up signing them to a $1.6 million endorsement deal. And it was right here in this moment that the power of this music, the power of hip hop to heavily influence the minds of the masses became undeniable. And it was around this time that hip hop culture began to fully establish itself. You know, breakdancing becomes mainstream with the Mighty Zulu Kings, the Rocksteady Crew, the Dynamic Rockers, and all these other breakdancers making it into the mainstream. And we now have these four main elements of hip hop culture established. These four things that make hip hop what it is: the DJ, the MC, graffiti art, and breakdancing. You combine these four elements and we have the hip hop culture. And you've got all these other hip hop artists that are coming up and also becoming mainstream. Dougie Fresh, Houdini, Heavy D and the Boys, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, Rob Bass and DJ Easy Rock, Young MC, Kid and Play, Salt and Pepper, the Fat Boys, you know, too many to name. At this point, hip hop music is just completely taking over. And all of these hip hop artists are continuing on and preserving the original essence of what hip hop had always been. That fun, positive, uplifting music designed to make you dance, while also throwing in those social messages and delivering it through this clean style, you know, no explicit lyrics. And the lyricism in the music is starting to evolve. We're starting to get more complex lyrics that are being delivered in these unique ways, to where you have to really pay attention to what's being said and decipher it as you listen. You know, all this unique wordplay that is stimulating the mind of the listener. And we're getting people like EPMD, Eric B. and Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, MC Light, LL Cool J, Chubb Rock, Kool Moe Dee, that are coming with these complex lyrical styles and this highly advanced wordplay that is forcing you to think and decipher as you listen to their music, which is encouraging this high amount of stimulation of your mind as you listen. And with these particular artists, the social commentary is really starting to pick up. You know, they still have those songs that are designed just for you to dance to, but now they're starting to get really specific with the messages and making it very clear who they are specifically speaking to, and that they're trying to use these messages in these songs, encouraging people to wake up and gain knowledge of who they are, and pumping in all these words of empowerment that are specifically directed towards Black people. And now that hip and hip hop is really starting to define this music and this culture. And it's not long after this that the floodgates just completely open up on this thing. And we start getting hip hop artists that are completely dedicated to delivering positive messages to the Black community and attempting to liberate their minds. You know, we got Public Enemy, X-Clan, Poor Righteous Teachers, Boogie Down Productions, Queen Latifah, Lakim Shabazz, A Tribe Called Quest. And again, the list goes on and on. Different artists were coming at it from different angles, but the ultimate overall message was the same: pushing people to take pride in themselves and to raise their consciousness. You know, and it was at this point that hip hop's ability to manipulate the mind of the listener was being fully exploited by the artists. They understood the power of this music and the impact it was having on the people that were listening to it. And they were using this music to try to raise the consciousness of the listeners on a mass scale.
Rap music is tops. Rap music is number one over here. Rap music is ruling. We coolin' and rap music is ruling. The main message to our rap music is have something to believe in and be yourself. and let people hear that we're not as stupid and as ignorant as they think we are.
Oh, right here with the young lady, the first lady of rap, MC Light. Right, ain't that right?
Yeah.
What does that symbolize to you, or it's just just you? It's just a.
Well, I went to an African school. Not many people know that. So I like a lot of things that bring out like my African heritage, like I wear jewelry and certain things. So I learned a lot of things that young black people haven't had the chance to learn.
Gotta put our heads together and stop the violence, cause real bad boys move in silence.
Kids follow fads more than they do laws. Kids follow fads more than they do their parents. So here comes BDP with clear and concise messages. We're here to how would I say, knock out the stereotypes. Knock them out completely.
Yo, Chuck, man, tell me a little bit about your academic background, because people can hear by your records and also by the way you speak, incredibly articulate. Obviously got an education.
Well, you know, my mom really stretched education in high school, and then I went to college, and I took a little break off after 2 years of really struggling on the calculus tip, because my brain was like getting fried. And I just, you know, I incorporate maybe what I've learned in school into my lyrics. But, you know, education is definitely the key for me and key for all youngsters out there, and I like to stress that.
But how do you feel about being a b-boy, you know, having that character, that flavor, and that quality of music, and then, you know, still being able to keep the intellectual vibe going?
Well, I'm a Gemini. They say Gemini got two personalities, you know. So obviously, every psyche has two different vectors to it. You have the educational sector, and then you got what you're from. This is where I'm from right here. This is the hardcore situation right here. This is the heartbeat of Chubb Rock right here on Flatbush Avenue and Avenue D. And that's where I get all of my little, I would say, my street knowledge from it. And of course, school bringing the educational section.
Poor righteous teacher.
What's up?
What's with the name?
What's with the name?
Break it down.
Well, to be brief and quick, you know, poor is the condition in which we were forced to live in as youth. You know, and once we gain knowledge of knowing our past, our present, and having the ability to influence our future, that made us almost righteous. So once we learned this truth, it was our duty by nature to teach it to the youth that lacked it, for they desired as much as we did. You know, it's like a thirst for the truth of a poor righteous teacher. So now we in this.
Here comes poor righteous teacher, well here comes the guys, giving you the insight. Might I pause? G, don't stop the lyrics, there's no positive cause. Means I meditate the swords like this. Sharp and the cutest, slice my mic cordless. Straight from the mouth of wise intelligent comes the truth about self. And greetings to the 5% roots of a black man. Cultural awareness, my brothers I'm concerned, but for devils I be careless. Mentally I swear this truth that I born. Coach I'm on a roll, for teacher carry on. To infinite I strive, note that tribe won't cease, cause the guys don't stop until it's time to say peace.
Some black men never really made it into manhood, just from where they are subject to live and grow up. So we're bringing the manifestation of this poverty state of existence to rap.
What I may manifest next. Holy righteous teachers dropping holy intellect.
Words we speak is universal language.
Exactly.
You know, that comes from our way of life.
There's many other brothers in rap that teach the exact same science. You have King's Son, you have Rakim, you have Brad Nubians, you have Lakim Shabazz, several gods in the circumference that are just constantly doing the duty, which is to teach he who established civilization, the knowledge of himself, the science of everything in life, which is
Love, peace, and happiness.
BRTV's always so controlling, they laugh, but listen to the lessons I'll be born. I'm the teacher.
When you go within our schools, the black children are stripped of black history, you know? They're taught that their history starts in slavery, and they contributed nothing to civilization itself.
Go, peace, but we'll be back, though.
This is the truth that must be heard, seen, and felt throughout the planet Earth. The complete victory for black peoples in the wilderness of North America. Total and complete victory is the goal. You know?
To return to our original state.
Exactly. To rise up each and every black soul out of the pit of ignorance.
Rakim means sun god from the land of the burnt-faced people. Ra means sun god. Kim is another word for Egypt. You know, and it means the land of the burnt-faced people. Once you deal with the mental, you know what I'm saying, and everything else speaks for itself. Once you tell somebody, you know, how powerful their mind is, and they think about it, then they start to utilize it, you know what I'm saying? Then they realize, you know, man, I can do this. I ain't got to ask, you know, I ain't got to put my hands together and look up. There's nothing glamorous about being a gangster, you know, because It's not really dealing with reality.
Now, anyone who wasn't familiar with X-Clan would immediately look at you and say, all right, what is X-Clan about? Because they're obviously not just another rap group.
Okay. I think the first thing we would make note is that by God's will, He has given us the opportunity to give energy to a people that we see need as much energy as we can possibly get through the form called hip-hop. We call ourselves messengers. We call ourselves those who have no other choice but to understand an oath that we've given each other, and one that we are going to exercise as far as the people is concerned, called freedom or death.
You know, I like to, say it plain and simple that rap is Black America's TV network. And the kids are finding out about all phases of Black life through those rap records.
Once again about the problems now that you see from a mellow L love and my boy Scooby. My name is Mark Kim, check it out. What's what I'm saying? Crack is in the world, there is no delaying. Please give me a break, all the rhyming people killing, all the stabbing people jabbing, and to know that I'm not willing.
We feel that a lot of younger black people are wrapped up into rap music, and we figure we can reach black people through the music. Music is a universal language. So when Public Enemy comes across with a message in the music, we feel that's the best way to reach black people.
We as black people don't realize our history enough. So us as rappers should at least be able to analyze our history and explain the history of rap as well as the history of us as a people, and get that across as many people that's listening as possible.
Back in the 60s, our brothers and sisters were hanged. How could you gang bang? I never ever ran from the Ku Klux Klan, and I shouldn't have to run from a black man, cause that's self-destruction. Yeah, it was self-destruction.
It's spiritual, it's internal. I think this is like, again, reincarnation of our ancestors speaking out. It's a tribal music, and the way they used to teach, they had a thing, or teachers in Africa were called griots, and they would talk over the sound of a drum and tell stories to the villages, and this is how basically the children learned about their heritage, and this is the exact same thing all over again in a modern day style.
The name Latifah is Arabic, and it means delicate and sensitive, and it was given to me when I was 8 years old by my cousin Sharonda. She's Muslim, and stuck with me ever since.
And Queen?
Queen came later on, as I gained more knowledge of who I am and where my people came from and so on and so forth. It was a title I adapted that I feel all black women hold.
How would you define, Latifah's style?
Real, down to earth. My style is very real and down to earth. It's not materialistic in any form or fashion. They call me Mama Zulu. De La Soul, my sons. Jungle Brothers, my sons. A Tribe Called Quest, my sons. Red Alert Production, my family. Public Enemy, like my family. Boogie Down Productions, my family. Flavor Unit, my posse. You know what I'm saying? And all of these groups are like one unit. We're just one unit, and one unit of people that think along the same lines.
Well, the truth of the matter is that black people have been taken advantage of for the last 500 years by cruel means, and it still exists today.
So what are you setting out to do to right this?
Well, in order to repair things and make it, clear for us in the future, the truth has to be explained, and the truth has been kept away from everybody for so long. Like I said, 1988, our motto is to explain black scrutinization around the world.
But to what lengths would you go to achieve the goals of black power?
The black power is not the goal.
No.
What is the goal?
The goal is a mind revolution. It's to get black people up out of the muck and mire of these wicked civilizations. What we want to do, we want to change the minds of black people so they can, number one, respect themselves so we can respect others. It's not a black power thing. We're not hung up on black power. And people hearing this coming from interviewers and asking us a question about black power, when we say that we're pro-black, a lot of people may take that as being anti-white. That's not the truth.
Our whole thing is to make our music grow and to show that we as black people can have something and not lose it like we lost the blues or jazz.
Rap is the Black American folk story. It's the Black American folk tale, male and female. And it's something that we definitely need to be around to control. And right now I see that we're losing control of it.
So for this short span of time, the floodgates have opened up completely. The artists are taking full advantage of the control that they have over the music. And people were gravitating towards this conscious hip hop. By the time Public Enemy dropped their second album, they sold over 1 million copies just in the United States alone. And this music was selling even more overseas. And you could just see the influence of this music, the culture as a whole. The language is shifting. And, you know, whether any of this was the ultimate end or not, it was clearly having a profound effect on the minds of the people that were listening. You know, it wasn't just black people. Everybody was gravitating towards this music. And again, we're getting these deeper messages, and then we're still getting that positive, uplifting, you know, feel good side of hip hop right along with it. And then all of a sudden, here comes NWA. It's no longer about these uplifting lyrics to help you rise above, but now it's about literally embodying everything that those circumstances has created. Everything that all these other rappers are trying to speak out against and are trying to use this music to elevate people away from. NWA is embodying on this more exaggerated scale the guns, the drugs, the violence, all the most negative aspects of the community. NWA comes in and it's giving life to these things, giving a new rush of energy to these things by literally embodying all of these elements. You know, they're coming in and saying that they are the problem. They are the ones that are carrying the guns, causing chaos in the community. And because this is who they are, you know, these hustlers, these bangers that just happen to rap, this was no longer just hip hop. This was gangster rap. And, you know, this wasn't the first time that we had somebody portray a gangster on a record. You know, we had Schoolie D before this, and then right after him, we had Ice-T. But this was different. This was a group of people literally embodying the image. Up until this point, we had never had anything like this. And especially to be promoted and pushed out onto the mainstream on this level. And the whole thing was that the mainstream narrative was that nobody wanted to play NWA's music. Nobody wanted to distribute their albums. Basically, nobody in the mainstream wanted anything to do with NWA. But at the same time, there's all this mainstream coverage on the fact that nobody wants to support NWA, which is pushing NWA further and further into the mainstream. And all this coverage leads to this debate over the freedom of expression and, you know, censorship, which ultimately leads to the very first time that NWA makes it onto national television, where they are introduced to the world on Yo MTV Raps, and this gangster rap that apparently nobody wanted officially becomes mainstream.
Straight out of Compton. They're straight out of Compton, California, the self-proclaimed world's most dangerous rap band. Certainly, NWA never thought they'd find themselves where they are, pop stars.
We get the money, the women, and cold bust the fat tables, boy.
NWA's sudden success brings with it a lot of controversy, like the fact that radio programmers all across the country can't find one single track to play that doesn't have explicit language, so they're just not playing it. The way they depict women as bitches on the album is not just upsetting to feminists. In fact, Rick Gillette, program director of WHYT in Detroit, says, quote, if we were to air any cuts, they'd require substantial edits.
And if you try to stop me, I don't give a damn.
The group's name itself is controversial. Niggers with Attitude, known as NWA, has taunted law enforcement with its lyrics urging violence against police. But it is the group's sexually explicit lyrics that attracted attention from the Attorney General's office. Lyrics too explicit to be repeated here, lyrics considered obscene by the authorities in Minnesota.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
But Priority Records, NWA's producers, said in a statement, the issue here is record burning and censorship. NWA songs are a reflection of social conditions, said the statement. The same stories told on NWA albums can be heard or read in the news.
Rap musician Eric Wright, better known as Eazy-E,
doesn't understand all the fuss about the 6-letter word. And if there were ever any doubts about the word's rising popularity, they were answered last year. NWA's second album, entitled
Niggas for Life.
One word dominated many of the album's songs. You guessed it.
I'm a nigga, he's a nigga, she's a nigga, we some niggas, wouldn't you like to be a nigga too?
Eazy-E doesn't believe his usage of the word is by any means distasteful or disrespectful. He says it's art and it's real. And after all, he adds, it all depends on how you say it.
Me going, what's up, nigga, is something totally different. When somebody looking at you and go, nigga, then you're gonna take it different.
Why do I call myself a nigga, you ask me? Because police always wanna harass me.
And as this music becomes even more popular, the popularity brings with it danger.
Now, if a white person walks up to Eazy-E and says, hey, nigger.
Depends on how you said it. Like if you say, what's up, nigga, then that's cool. But if you just say, nigger, then I'm gonna take it different.
Got Eazy-E, MC Ren, Dr. Dre, TJ Yella. Could you explain like NWA and Eazy-E?
It's an all-star group. It's all of us. Me, Dre, Yella, Ren, Ice Cube. And mine is me, solo.
How close are you to real life to what your records are?
They're just as real as this gun. Look, see this chamber right there? This is no bullshit. It's real, it's a real gun.
9 millimeters in your ass.
Hollywood bullshit, man.
You gotta carry it easy, you get fucked up on the street. So you gotta be
and this got an
prepared.
infrared scope on it. You put the dot on your target and you blow this shit out the motherfucker.
No joke.
Okay, now, in your records, you know, obviously you guys must know a little bit of something of what you're talking about because you couldn't do that. What is your background?
Everybody grew up in the street. Everybody know what's going on. Like some rappers like Mix-a-Lot and all of them and try to rap about shit out here. They can't do it because they wasn't around it, but we could do it because we was around it all our life.
Right. I've been through everything. I've been killings, robbery, murder, thieving, and everything. The whole 9 yards, dope dealing, everything. Everything you hear on our records is true.
Yeah, we figure you can't rap about nothing you don't know nothing about.
You know, it either happened or it could happen. Basically, gangsta rap, I guess it's like telling the real and not holding back, giving up, you know, the reality from the street point of view. And like by us being from the streets, we know how to report it. I tell, you know, basically what's going on.
I have some lyrics here from some of the songs that you've done in your career, and to be very honest, much of this I can't even say on television, but I want to read some of this to you. So what about the bitch that got shot? F her. You think I care about a bitch? I ain't a sucker.
Right.
Songs
That's
titled...
not talking about women, though.
What is it talking about?
A lot of women, bitches. It's a difference.
People have accused you of capitalising on the gang violence thing or glamorising it, even profiteering from marketing this image of gang violence.
You know, a lot of rappers, they talking about, don't do this, you know. You guys don't have to steal and rob,
you might not get on the radio.
Yeah, or you know, y'all kids, man, be cool, don't do this. Because don't sell drugs. And they living large, you know, they selling records.
You won't be joining the Stop the Violence movement or anything. No. What do you think of the Stop the Violence movement?
To each his own.
Yeah, somebody, you can be in a concert, they can be in a concert singing Stop the Violence with them while they doing it. But when they get outside, they're going to shoot somebody, so it don't make a difference.
They could do a drive-by.
I noticed Schoolie D has got the Stop the Violence logo on the back of his latest record.
I don't mean nothing. Somebody buy it, they still going to probably shoot somebody.
Just think about it. Before NWA came out, there was nobody out there doing gangster rap. We're the inventors of gangster rap music.
When people listen to it, we want them to be real scared. We want everybody to be scared
Why do
of
you
it.
want them to be scared?
Because they supposed to fear NWA.
Cut.
You want them to be... Okay, I'll be scared.
Cut.
They gonna be scared anyway when they hit.
Well, how'd you get the title? How'd you come up with the title?
Because we niggas. And as long as we remain to be alive, we'll always be niggas, and ain't nobody gonna change that.
You know, we're not role models.
Nah.
You know, we're not out to send any messages, anything like that. We do it to get paid. We make records to get paid. This is a job, you know. We got to keep eating.
There was a statement made, I'm not sure which one of you this quote belongs to, but it was about South Africa, and it was something to the effect of, we don't care about them because they don't care about us.
It ain't like that. It ain't like that. It's like this. All right. You got like people out in the community now, right? It's like a fad, all the black power stuff. It's like a fad right now. And there's a lot of people that know what's going on, but then there's people that don't know what's going on. You know what?
They want to wear the black medallions because everybody else is wearing it.
They faking it.
And I heard Easy mumble something.
He said they all overnight black men.
Overnight black.
Again, they are embodying everything that hip hop was designed to push back against. And specifically, everything these even more conscious hip hop artists are trying to elevate the masses away from. The lack of self-respect, the lack of wisdom that leads to the street mentality. These rappers were trying to pull people out of that state of mind. And NWA comes in and was glamorizing all of it, going against everything that hip hop was built on and where it was clearly headed. And there's no doubt that they were coming in direct opposition to the conscious movement that had been building up in hip hop, because they're calling out conscious hip hop directly. And they're saying, we have no message. We aren't role models. We're doing this strictly for the money, to get paid. And we're just telling our truth, because everything we talk about in our records, we've lived it. The guns, the drugs, the robberies, the murders. This is our life, our reality. But then you go back and you look at what these guys were doing before NWA. And we know that Yella and Dr. Dre were both a part of the world-class wrecking crew, making all this fast-paced party music. And their whole thing was about love and romance. Literally, their first album was called Wrapped in Romance. And everything was built around this soft, romantic theme. You know, they were in these shiny sequence outfits with these really flamboyant and, you know, kind of ambiguous attitudes. And at the time, you know, they're really getting into these themes, into these characters. Dr. Dre really is the doctor with the full costume and, you know, everything. The stethoscope, the long, tight knitted robe to look like a doctor. These guys were in full character. They were on this 100% playful, we ain't here to hurt nobody type of vibe. During their performances, they're doing all these choreographed dance sequences. It's just all about having a good time. Nothing gangsta about these guys. And then we know Ice Cube and Dr. Dre hook up not too long after this. And Cube comes out looking pretty much just like another member of the world-class wrecking crew with that flamboyant, you know, kind of almost pretty boy style. Again, nothing gangsta about it. And along with Dr. Dre, they formed the group Crew in Action, or CIA. And after Ice Cube and Dr. Dre formed the CIA, it isn't too long after this that they hook back up with DJ Yella, and they bring in C. Ren and Eazy-E and officially form NWA. So the last thing before them forming this gangster rap group that gets pushed into the mainstream and basically ushers in gangster rap in the midst of all this conscious hip hop starting to form is them creating a group called the CIA. And they go on to portray these gangster roles, but none of these guys had criminal backgrounds. You know, Eazy-E did drop out of high school, but he ended up going back and getting his GED. And then you got Lonzo Williams, who was with these guys during the world-class wrecking crew days, the CIA in the early days of NWA. And he's saying that none of these guys were even close to what they were portraying on these records.
The one thing that I think was so different about NWA when they came out was it was like the first gangster rap group. And they rapped about gangster shit. People getting killed, gang banging, gang signs. From your point of view, knowing them since they were kids, working with Dre, working with Ice Cube, working with, you know, Eazy and so forth. Who were the gangsters in the group, if any?
Me.
You?
I was the only gangster. I don't know when they did the gangster shit around here. I had to. I ran a club on Avalon No Segundo.
Okay.
And, you know, I was going to jail for possession of firearms and attempted murder and shit like that.
Oh.
These guys never had them kind of problems. Ice Cube was a great kid, just a nice kid.
So Ice Cube wasn't gangbanging at all?
No.
Was it a little weird hearing about all this gangbanging stuff from someone that doesn't gangbang at all?
Fuck me up.
Yeah?
What the fuck? Who? I'm like, you got to be bullshit.
Like songs like Gangster. Like I thought Ice Cube was the most gangster motherfucker on the planet.
You know what?
I thought Ice Cube come in here and kill everybody. You know what I mean?
He's a great actor.
That's what it is?
He's a great actor. You know, and and I think probably one of my only problems I had with the whole NWA thing is that because hip hop is based on keeping it real, keeping it 100, most people don't vet the artist that they are idolizing. And they assume because you say it, you are it. When you have been doing this thing as long as I have and see the effects of it, okay, and you know the players in the game that really wasn't from it, so it's kind of hard for me, okay? When I first got into the club business, 1979. Now, first of all, gangs have been around forever in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Gangs had different reasons for existence. The ratio of gangbangers to civilians was minuscule in the early 70s and early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, okay? Right after NWA, now I've been in the club business all this time, and I stopped making records. Went back to my second career, which is nightclub owner. What happened was NWA and gangster rap made gangster lifestyle cool. So the ratio started to change. Everybody was a gangbanger. There used to be a time when there were places that you could go and you could feel safe. But when the gangster lifestyle became fashionable, the whole city became one big ass war zone.
And there was so many instances where it seemed like people in the industry were subliminally calling these guys out for not being who they were claiming to be.
What happened to ruthless niggas for life and all that? What's up? Yellow, what's up? Ren, what's the deal?
Man, we hungry. Chicken, man. I want to eat some chicken.
You hungry too? Now, see, now we're talking. You fronting on me. Don't you ever front on me, Easy, all right, man?
KFC.
Let's do the what? Oh, okay, I understand. Yo, let's go to DOC video, man. Yo, Easy, get off my watch, man. You got that Rolex on. You don't see me trying to steal your watch, man. It's a deal, Easy. Yo, we back with NWA. They got the #1 pop album in the country. You know what I'm saying? Yo,
said that 3 times.
I'm right. I'm not going for that. Pop group. No pop group, man. What's going on with Ruthless Records, man? What's the new stuff? What y'all working on? You know, what's going on? What's that, Easy? Come on, you're on TV. I ain't even gonna talk.
I'll tell you to talk to
Trey got a brand new group called Jimmy Z coming out.
Yeah, and?
I got a new group called Yomo Marky coming out.
Now, where do you find these brothers at?
Okay. How the whole NWA thing get together, man?
Well, I don't know. A couple of them was breaking in my house, stealing cars on the streets, trash cans and stuff.
Yeah.
So I just picked them up.
So you just picked them up and felt sorry for them and just gave them a job and
he was stealing government cheese and it's free.
Was it? That's the truth. Is that the truth, Yella? You was already making records. Now, what I want to know, I've been dying to ask y'all this question. Hold it! How did you and Trey evolve from the world-class wrecking crew into NWA? Don't you think I forgot about that? Don't be trying to hush me up right now. I remember them before you turned out the light records. Don't you, wait a minute.
What we're going to do right now is go to the next video. NWA 100 miles
I remember that, yeah.
We'll talk about that later tomorrow. We're going to stay tuned with Blaxploitation vacation out in LA. For 2 weeks we'll be out here.
I remember when you had a ruffled shirt on and Yellow used to dress like Prince. I remember that. Don't you try to front on me. We're going to be right back with NWA.
There it is. Let's go to this video. This is NWA. Hold on. Can I introduce this video? Yeah. Check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, this is 4 little kids with big suits on that don't fit them with fake Uzis in this video. This is NWA. Whack video. Just watch it anyway.
Like there's so much power in unity, and when I see brothers going through this, it's rough to watch, you know. Right. Because I respect you both as businessmen. I would like, let's talk about the business of gangster rap. A lot of people say that it's reached its peak.
I don't think so.
Really? You think it's going to go farther? Where is it going to go?
Over the top.
Uh-oh, Chris?
I mean, actually, the title Gangsta Rap doesn't even really exist, because real gangsters don't rap. Gangsters. So maybe, you know, I would go more into the idea of gangster record companies. If the real gangsters out here are the ones who own the gangster rapper on another level, I go more into business. Gangster's about business. It's like business rap. It's not even gangster rap. It's business raps. And if you want to get rid of gangster rap, first you got to get rid of the gangster record company. And I'll just cut it off right there.
Okay.
So, you know, if they weren't who they were claiming to be on these records, then you got to question why. And looking at where hip hop was going, you know, beyond just that positive, uplifting music and moving into something much more conscious, where the artists were literally using this music to try to wake up and stimulate the minds of the masses. And in the midst of all this, NWA comes in and goes against everything these rappers were trying to do. It just seems like they were purposely placed into that position to portray those negative stereotypes and to completely destroy where hip hop was going. And as this whole NWA thing is becoming mainstream, and, you know, gangster rap is also becoming mainstream, we also have the group 2 Live Crew that is also starting to push into the mainstream with, again, the argument of, you know, freedom of speech and censorship, because instead of the gangster rap, they're coming with these hypersexual explicit lyrics. It's literally like pornography on a rap record. Again, something that we had never heard or seen before. And just like NWA, the mainstream narrative was that nobody wanted anything to do with 2 Live Crew. Nobody wanted to play their music. Nobody wanted to sell their records. But all the mainstream coverage of the fact that nobody wanted anything to do with 2 Live Crew is making the world more aware of 2 Live Crew. And there was a huge media frenzy around this group. You had store owners getting arrested just for selling their records. And it gets to the point where 2 Live Crew is actually taken to court and put on trial for their lyrics, which again creates this huge debate over freedom of speech, which is giving 2 Live Crew more attention. And again, it's pushing this group that supposedly nobody wanted anything to do with further and further into the mainstream.
Mark Emery was given a conditional discharge today for selling the 2 Live Crew album As Nasty As They Wanna Be. Our London Bureau Chief Steve Parr has more.
Mark Emery walked into London's courthouse convinced he would be found guilty of selling obscene material. He was right. Last October, the bookshop owner sold copies of the band 2 Live Crew album, Nasty As They Wanna Be. Today, Judge John Menzies ruled the band's violent themes are obscene. Emery was convicted but given a discharge on the condition he is of good behavior for a year.
Emery made no secret that he planned to sell the cassette called Nasty As They Wanna Be by the rap group 2 Live Crew. He said he was doing it to challenge Canada's obscenity laws. His lawyer attempted to argue that the criminal code definition of obscenity is unduly vague and therefore violates the Charter of Rights. But Judge John Menzies would not allow evidence pertaining to the constitutional challenge. He ruled today that the cassette exceeds community standards of tolerance. Judge Menzies found the average Canadian, male or female, would not abide other Canadians hearing this particular musical publication. As for Mark Emery, he remains defiant.
The record industry, recording artists, and various people are going to suffer far more substantially in the future than this cassette would indicate today. I mean, it made it look like it was just an exercise in academia, like we're going to discuss, you know, the merits of this case. What it really means is in the future the police can charge retailers for having 15, 20, 30, 40 tapes that may be similar to this one, and a precedent's been set.
The material in question is the highly publicized and highly criticized rap album, As Nasty As They Want to Be by Americans 2 Live Crew. Last year, the album, which was banned in several states in the United States and was taken off the shelves at major record stores in Ontario as well.
And in a court of law with a jury, I doubt if they'll win this case.
In Florida, another record store owner was charged with selling the recording, which contains sexually explicit lyrics and lyrics about violence against women. Emery said that it was unconstitutional to prohibit the sale of the record. Many agreed with him and even staged marches outside the courthouse in support of his position.
A Florida jury says the rap group 2 Live Crew can't be as nasty as they want to be if they want their records sold in stores. In what's being called a landmark case, the jury convicted a record store owner on obscenity charges for selling a 2 Live Crew album, an album banned by a federal judge because of its lyrics. Charles Freeman was arrested in June for selling the album As Nasty as They Want to Be. He insists his arrest violates the First Amendment right of freedom of speech and says his conviction is racially motivated.
It doesn't reflect my community as a black man in Broward County. It's unfair. The jury was all white. There were no blacks on the jury pool at all, only one. And they don't know where EC Records is. They don't know nothing about the damn ghetto.
The leader of 2 Live Crew also faces trial in Florida. He's charged with performing obscene material. Freeman's lawyers say there will be an appeal.
The latest chapter in a growing national debate over where in a democratic society art ends and obscenity begins and who should decide. Doug Tennell reports.
The Florida furor that has engulfed 29-year-old rap musician Luther Campbell and his group 2 Live Crew today spread to communities across the country. The group's album, As Nasty as They Wanna Be, was ordered off record store shelves by police in San Antonio today. In Huntsville, Alabama, where the group is to perform this weekend, the city council tightened its obscenity laws last night. The group may face arrest, officials in Huntsville say, if the group's performance includes material ruled obscene by a federal judge in South Florida.
You don't tell us what we can do and say around adults. The adult has the right to listen to what they want to listen to. If they don't want to hear the 2 Live Crew, then they don't buy no ticket. They won't be at that concert.
The same Cincinnati sheriff that cracked down on the Maplethorpe exhibition has also ordered 2 Live Crew's album off record store shelves. The reason? Sexually explicit lyrics like these.
All the girls and I make them cry. I'm like a dog getting beat up, freak without warning. I have an appetite for sex. Cause me so
That's for an adult audience. And that's who we want it for. The adults, 18 years and older.
The federal judge's ruling dismissed Campbell's claim that his music is both artistic and cultural expression. The band album, which had been suffering from declining sales, has been climbing up record charts across the country since the judge's ruling last week. A new album and a European tour are in the works, all signs of a corporation with a bright future, if the CEO manages to stay out of jail.
So you got store owners getting arrested for selling these records. You got members of 2 Live Crew getting arrested for performing the lyrics. You got everyday civilians getting arrested. But in all this backlash and this media coverage about how nobody wants anything to do with this music, the record companies and major corporations that are responsible for distributing this music are not being held accountable at all. They're not even being mentioned amongst all this media coverage. Even when 2 Live Crew's lyrics are put on trial, 2 Live Crew is taken to court. Not the distribution company responsible for distributing this music out to the masses, not the record company responsible for signing and giving this group a platform. You know, everything about this was just saying publicity stunt. Because with everything being focused on 2 Live Crew, it's actually giving more media coverage to 2 Live Crew. And they're hitting us at multiple angles. On one end, it's a First Amendment right issue. You know, it's all about freedom of speech. And then on the other end, it's a racism issue, targeting the free will of black people specifically. And all of this is culminating in people getting arrested for supporting this music. And all of these arrests are conveniently being captured on video. And then this whole thing being painted as a fight for freedom and being aggressively pushed out into the mainstream media is actually enticing people to support this music. You know, all this media coverage is doing nothing but increasing the sales. They're playing the lyrics from the songs. They're showing the imagery from the music videos. This is all really just promotion. Because you would think if you don't want something to be seen or heard, It's pretty simple. You don't give it any attention. You don't play it. You don't show it. But they were doing the exact opposite. They're giving this thing as much attention as it could possibly get. They're telling you we're against this, but then they're constantly showing it. They're constantly promoting it. And again, the artists that are going to lead you to the music are the ones that are getting all the attention. No mention of the record labels, no mention of the distribution companies. This was the exact same thing they did with NWA, claiming that they were against the music while at the same time giving all the media attention to NWA. But the major corporations responsible for actually financing these artists and giving them a platform on the national stage are not being acknowledged at all by the media. You know, you got NWA being backed and financed by Universal, and you got 2 Live Crew being backed and financed by Warner. These 2 major corporations that both just so happen to have investments in radio and media. So it's almost like the same corporations financing and backing this music are the same ones that are using the media to subliminally promote them. And at this point, we're getting hit at both ends. The guns, the drugs, the gangster rap being promoted by NWA. And then we got the lack of sexual discipline, the disrespect of women, and basically the pornography being promoted by 2 Live Crew. And what's crazy is that years later, you got Brother Marcus from 2 Crew coming out and saying that he regrets ever putting this music out.
You know, these days, a rapper coming out with a song called We Want Some Pussy wouldn't even raise an eyebrow. But back then, you know, We Want Some Pussy, throw the D, like this just wasn't done in music in general and hip hop in particular. So when this came out, what was the initial reaction?
Well, with me, I didn't like doing that style of rap. You know what I mean? I was, you know, calling myself being on something kind of conscience, more hip hop-ish, and I really wasn't comfortable with all the profanity that we were putting into the music, but my grandmother taught me a lot of respect. She taught me a lot of good values that I kind of, you know, that I kind of live by today. And I guess once it had, when you see the reaction from it, you know, in the community and everybody's loving it, you know, you kind of go with it, you know?
I mean, at your age, when you look back at some of the lyrics, you know, for example, you know, me and my homies like to play this game, some call it Amtrak, you know, we call it the train. And there's a part of the song where you say, the girl will say, stop, I say, I'm not. I mean, kind of rapey lyrics when you look back on it.
Yeah, but I have never forced myself on a female. I've never raped a young lady. I've always had consensual sex. Never none of that. Never none.
I understand that, and I'm not accusing you of that. Yeah, but what I'm saying is that when you look at those lyrics, some of that
was going on back then, and my loyalty turned into stupidity. And I thought that I was being smart at that time, which I was being stupid. But it all comes from, you know, I had no male figures in my life, and this fast. I'm down there in Miami. It's a culture shock. It was new and it blew up so fast, man. It happened so fast. And by the time it got started and by the time it ended, it was done.
And now things are really starting to crank up because you got Ice-T, who's also getting more popular and is taking on this persona of, you know, the pimp and the gangster. And eventually he drops the song Cop Killer, which is literally a song about killing police officers. And again, all of this is being financed by Warner Brothers, a major corporation. And coincidentally enough, in the time that all this is going on, we also have all these extensive studies and experimental research on the effects of music on the human brain. Right around 1989, right when NWA, 2 Live Crew, Ice-T are starting to be pushed into the mainstream. At the same time, they are studying how music affects the human brain, and specifically how it makes its way to the temporal lobe through the auditory cortex and completely bypasses the conscious mind. At the same time that we're getting this experimental research on music and the human brain, we're also seeing this drastic shift in hip hop. And if there was any question that this wasn't being intentionally done, right behind NWA, we're getting groups like HWA, who was again financed and backed by Universal. And they just kept pushing it. Right along with HWA, we got BWP, who was signed to Columbia Records, financed and backed by Sony. But while this is all going on, we still have these artists that are sticking to the foundation of hip hop and are staying dedicated to putting out these more positive, conscious messages. You know, we got Brand Nubian, The Wise Guys, Gangstar, Harmony, Miss Melody, The Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, all dropping these deep, conscious messages in their lyrics while staying 100% clean and 100% positive. And what's crazy is that even on the exact same record label as 2 Live Crew, we still have MC Shy D, who's coming with that same Southern Miami-based sound, but without any of the explicit lyrics. MC Shy D is dropping this heavy on the bass, party music with nothing but positive lyrics, speaking out against the drugs and the violence within the community, making songs about love and commitment, all over this down south Miami bass sound. 3 straight albums, all conscious with positive messages. But he's not getting near the same amount of publicity and mainstream attention as 2 Live Crew. But the music is still resonating with the masses, you know, enough for 3 straight albums. And then we got the group Kid and Play that is still going strong. And in the midst of all this going on, is actually taking this uplifting, positive hip hop to a whole nother level. You know, they had taken it to where they were no longer just rappers. They were showmen. They were full on performers. And what they were doing, putting on these insane performances while at the same time dropping these empowering lyrics, was beginning to catch on a massive scale. Again, the album sales are already taking off and their popularity with everybody is starting to go through the roof. And they got so popular that they ended up moving into Hollywood and starring in their very own movie, which continued to showcase, you know, those foundational elements of hip hop, you know, the DJ, the MC, and the ultimate goal of hip hop, you know, to have a good time and to keep it positive, you know, even in the worst of circumstances. And this thing ended up doing $26 million at the box office, which at that time in the early 90s, you know, was a pretty good amount of money. We'd had hip hop movies before, you know, Crush Groove, Wild Style, Beat Street, all great movies. But this was the first hip hop movie to ever be a box office hit. And after this movie, Kid and Play's popularity just went crazy. They just kept getting bigger and they had pretty much become household names. They became so well known and so much larger than life that they ended up getting their very own cartoon. And they were the very first hip hop artists to ever do this, to actually have their own cartoon, an animated series that was specifically dedicated to them. And the cartoon was just like an extension of their music. Each show had this, you know, overarching positive message in it. And they would actually bring these other artists that were also dropping these positive messages onto the show, you know, to kind of reinforce these positive messages. And now with the album sales, the movie, the cartoon, Kid and Play at this point have become, you know, megastars. And they're getting opportunities for even more movies. House Party 2, House Party 3, Class Act. And all of these movies have soundtracks featuring Kid and Play that again are sticking to that positive, uplifting message. All of this is being fueled by this positive music that Kid and Play is continuing to put out. And again, this positive music is bringing these to this insane amount of success. This positive music is resonating with everybody. And they again become the very first and only rappers to ever have their very own Marvel comic, a comic book series that was completely dedicated to Kid and Play. And it tackled a lot of social issues and things dealing with everyday to-day life. And it pretty much played off of Kid and Play's career and their journey as rappers. But every now and again, it would get deep. Like the very last issue, when Kid and Play get inserted into the world of the Marvel superheroes. And they're basically being attacked by these Marvel characters, but they don't know why they're being attacked. And Play comes to realize that the one controlling these Marvel characters is actually him. And that he basically created this attack on himself through his own negative mindset. And once he recognizes this, he's then able to battle and conquer that negative side of himself, that lower nature. So Kid and Play is going strong and showing how this positive hip hop can be taken to an entirely different level. Still hadn't reached the full potential of where this thing could go. Because as Kid and Play is doing their thing, we've also got the emergence of MC Hammer. He released his very first album completely independent. He ended up selling over 60,000 albums. And he was getting offers from pretty much every single major label that was out there. And once he signed to a major label, the amount of success was just off the charts. He drops his first album on a major label and it ends up going double platinum. And it just keeps getting bigger from there. He drops another album and it ends up selling over 10 million copies. And MC Hammer becomes the very first rapper to ever sell this many albums, to have an album go diamond. And at this point, MC Hammer has become arguably the biggest hip hop artist in the world. And as his success keeps growing, he's transcending just hip hop and becoming this pop culture icon. And from the independent album to the two major label albums, MC Hammer is putting out nothing but positive hip hop, nothing but uplifting, positive hip hop, but with this insane amount of energy. I mean, you could literally feel the energy coming through the record. And at the same time, he's addressing all these social issues. You know, he's dropping songs like Help the Children, Black is Black, Let's Go Deeper, Crime Story, all with these deep, conscious messages. And he wasn't just rapping these lyrics. He's putting on an entire performance with these elaborate choreographed dance moves, strobe lights, pyrotechnics, and he's filling the stage with all these other dancers. All of these dancers are friends, family, people he grew up with in the neighborhood that he is putting on through this positive hip hop. And they're putting on these epic performances. They're performing all over the world. And every single show is a sold out crowd. And MC Hammer is at the top of the hip hop, R&B, and pop charts. MC Hammer is taking over hip hop.
Here comes the Hammer! Yes, this is the mission that I'm on.
Meet the Hammer, MC Hammer, the music phenomenon of the moment. He's got $10 million legs and stands to make $100 million by the end of 1990. To say he's hot is an understatement.
This is signifying 5 million.
Can't touch this.
That was a month ago. Sales for MC Hammer's second album, Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em, are at the 7 million mark. It's been #1 on the Billboard pop charts for 19 weeks. These figures are staggering for any album, but for a rap record, they're unheard of. MC Hammer is 27 years old, and he's got it made. Almost single-handedly, he's turned rap into the mainstream pop of the 90s. Hammer was born Stanley Kirk Burrell, one of 8 kids. He and his family lived in East Oakland, a poor, depressed neighborhood, aptly described as inner city.
It's very, very tough to live in that type of an environment and survive.
I said we pray. Oh yeah, we...
A poor inner city kid from a broken home. Not exactly a recipe for success. You grew up in Oakland, one of 8 kids, in a neighborhood that somebody just described to me that now looks like the streets of Beirut. Crime, drugs. Why don't you think you went that way? Were you ever tempted to go that way?
Was I ever tempted? I would say that anybody who grew up on my block had to be tempted.
Hammer said no to drugs, selling his albums out of the trunk of his car. His first album, Let's Get It Started, spawned 3 top 10 singles. The house that Hammer built includes cousins, Navy buddies, and neighborhood pals. His brother Chris is the tour director, and brother Louis is his manager. He's hit it big, and he's taken everyone along for the ride. His music has a little something for everybody. There are no 4-letter words in his act. His broad appeal makes hardcore rappers say,
once you are a pop success in rap, they call you a sellout.
It's a visual extravaganza designed to show off Hammer and his budding entertainment empire. All the groups touring with him are signed to his record label. Hammer and his posse are currently on a worldwide tour, which won't wind down until sometime in 1992.
Does it surprise you that you're the #1 recording artist and you don't sing?
Every single song he releases is hit #1. He's selling out every arena, selling millions of albums, being nominated for every single award you could think of. And he's winning all of them. Best rap album, best rap artist, best rap video. And, the list just keeps going on. And after selling over 10 million copies and going diamond, his third album becomes so huge that they end up turning it into its own movie. And this was the first of its kind, a full-on hip-hop musical. And it was based around MC Hammer fighting off the drug dealers in the community that were using the kids in the community to traffic the drugs. So again, you got this strong social message to elevate above those negative circumstances. And it keeps going from there. He ends up getting his own cartoon, an animated series completely based off of MC Hammer, which is again addressing all these different social issues and reinforcing all these positive messages, and is basically turning MC Hammer into this larger than life superhero whose #1 goal is to protect the community from the people trying to corrupt it. And MC Hammer is becoming just as much larger than life in reality. He's being approached by pretty much every single major company you could think of to use his likeness to promote their products. And he ends up getting this huge endorsement deal with British Knights, which in the early 90s was this really popular shoe brand. These companies are just throwing money at MC Hammer to endorse their products because it seemed like anything connected to MC Hammer meant success. And that success just kept growing. He's got his own toothpaste, his own bath soap, all these different products where they are using that MC Hammer likeness because of the level of success connected to it. He's got his own board game, and he ends up even getting his very own handheld video game. Again, the very first rapper to ever do this. The very first rapper to ever have his own video game. And again, it kept going. He becomes the very first rapper to have his very own action figure. Again, the very first rapper to ever have something like this. Of course, inevitably, he also gets his own comic based off of his career. Again, inserted with those positive messages. And again, all of this is being driven by this positive hip hop with these conscious social messages. It was clear that on a large scale, this is what people wanted. This positive hip hop was resonating with the world. And MC Hammer was showing no signs of slowing down. And keep in mind that at the time that MC Hammer is seeing all of this success, gangsta rap is also on the rise. But MC Hammer is continuing to outshine gangsta rap with this positive hip hop. He's still selling the most records, getting the most radio play, and winning all the awards.
Okay, the next award is for favorite rap artist.
Let's hear a little nominee rap and try and guess who will win. Let's check it out.
Okay, let's see.
For favorite artist, rap. Easy E. MC Hammer.
Turn up the volume on the speaker, because otherwise it gets stronger as the other tone. I can never be wrong. I got it going on.
Okie-doke, and the winner is MC Hammer.
But you started to get a lot of artists within the industry that were coming against MC Hammer, starting to call him a sellout, saying that he wasn't really hip hop, even though everything he was about was literally built off of the foundation of what hip hop was. Those positive, uplifting lyrics designed to make you dance while addressing those social issues head on using the music to uplift the community and to positively stimulate the mind of the listener. This was what MC Hammer was. And it started to get to the point where it started to feel like this was a calculated attack on MC Hammer. Like this was all being done purposely. Like if he didn't represent what he did, that positive image, then all of his success might not have been such a problem. And eventually it got to the point where MC Hammer started to come out and start to address it. And he was saying that it wasn't just people in the industry that seemed to be trying to tear him down.
You talk about as much of this as you can talk about on the air. I know a lot of the problems that you've been having have to deal with lies and confrontations you've had with law enforcement situations. How much of it can you explain to people, and maybe to the people out there who need to hear it?
On one end, in the streets like where I'm from in Oakland, for a year and a half straight, when the police would arrest people, they would slam them in a car and say, Hammer time. And slam them in the car and say, yeah, I just put you in the brand new car that Hammer bought me. And they knew that would hurt with my street credibility with the people in my neighborhood.
So young guys who've been arrested, told you what happened during
They called me from jail, because, I'm from Oakland, and it's no secret, of the 15 or 20 guys I have out here with me, most of them are from jail. And, because I want to get them out of that, I bring them with me and give them a new job and show them a new, a different way of life. But when something happened to them, they go to jail, they pick up the phone, they got my phone number, they call me at home. And they'll call me and say, Hammer, you should have heard what the police said to me today. He said when the helicopter was chasing me, that was the Hammercopter chasing him. And these rumors have spread all the way from Oakland through LA, and because I get people calling me all the time, and it's not a good thing. And especially when I've been a person who spent a lot of my time, with the kids, trying to help the kids, to steer them away from doing wrong things. It don't help to have the police, to destroy the foundation that you're trying to build to be a help instead of a hurt to the situation.
Okay, so let me ask you, to make it fair, let me play devil's advocate. Why would a cop want to destroy your credibility in the ghetto? Why would he tell him that Hammer bought us a helicopter?
That gets very deep because, there's a lot of reasons why you might not want Hammer to stop some of the guys who doing what they doing from doing, and see that goes, if I'm benefiting from anything that's going on in the streets, why would I want Hammer to tell little kids this is not the thing to do?
Oh, okay.
You see, because I have made a good impact, especially in my neighborhood. The guys who are with me right now, they were running things in our neighborhood. And a lot of people know what I mean when I say running things. They had a trade going. They had little kids posted out doing their little things and, and everything like that. But since they've been here for 3 years, none of them have been picked up and went back to jail for any type of drug thing at all. None of them. Not one in 3 years.
Okay.
So somebody, somewhere loses money when this goes on. Now, the ideal is not to try to hurt people's income. That's not the ideal. The ideal is to save lives because whether people understand it or not, there is a certain amount of murder and death that comes along with the game. That's a part of doing business. So when people stop doing that, some people are hurt in other areas. And, we don't have no time to cover all that. But basically, it's an unfortunate situation because when they said that hurt my credibility with a lot of the people in the streets who've known me for a long time because they in jail fighting with people. You don't know Hammer, you can't say this. And, I have uncles who are not the best citizens in the world, and they'll call me because I just had another fight. This dude said this about you, man, and I ain't having it, So, I mean, how can I win in either one of those positions? One end, you kill me in the streets. The other end, you say I'm the man. Now, I can't be both of them. I got to be either one or the other. So I've dealt with that because I'm not a person who runs. I'm going to deal with it. The third shooting that wasn't really made public, there was another shooting incident. I don't know where they come from or who do them or whatever, but none of that is going to stop me from doing what I'm doing. I've even had a record company, and I don't want to lamb-blast nobody's name or anything, but they told me, Hammer, you know what the problem is? You're a little too clean. Here's what we're going to do. Why don't you start to do a few things that maybe dirty up your image a little bit. Maybe we can sell a little more records. I've had all that. I told him, go, you know, that's not me. I lived that life. I've been around with people involved in that. I'm going to continue to do what I do. Whether they like it or not, I'm going to try to encourage the kids to do the right thing. That doesn't mean that I lived a perfect life. I'm telling them to stay away from them negative things so that they won't ruin their lives.
I've heard the rumor. It's a very competitive business, man. Very competitive. You had an incident. Now, don't mention no names. No names. Don't mention no names. But you had an incident recently that amazed me when they told me about it. And I asked you earlier, and you said it was true.
We were on tour. We're on tour right now with some of the hottest groups in the country, the Superfest. And one of the groups, they didn't want to accept what was happening on the stage. They wouldn't pull the plug on us while we were performing.
The actual plug of the sound or the lights or what?
The sound. First, they pulled the sound, so I was performing in the dark. We kept going. And then later in the show, they cut the sound and lights both. But we kept going, and the crowd supported us, and it came out. We were, you know. But the thing about it that kind of shocked me was that I expected somebody on that level, at that point in their career, to say, if we're having a good show, they should have a good show, and we just all give our all. But it didn't work like that, and I didn't know it was that competitive.
Yeah. Wow. I almost want to tell who it was.
Nah.
We won't go.
We don't want to do that.
He asked me not to get into that, and out of respect to Oaktown's own, I won't do that. I read in the USA Today, that they're starting in some city in the South, I think Texas, if I'm not mistaken, to put labels on the albums because the lyrics of some artists are becoming crazy.
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people familiar with the product. It has the profanity in it and everything. And of course, we're not advocates of that type of product. That's why we stick with what we do and try to project, a positive image to the kids. So we stick with that particular avenue. And for us, you won't see any of those stickers on our albums because we don't do that type of material.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you came back. Every time you hear you start a fire.
But despite all this backlash coming from within the industry and from all these other directions, and even with gangster rap beginning to take over hip hop, MC Hammer still not slowing down. He drops his 4th album, and this thing ends up going triple platinum. More positive messages, even more positive energy. And MC Hammer is still going strong. He's bridging that generational gap between the younger crowd and the older crowd. He even gets the acknowledgement from James Brown himself as being the next one to carry that mantle as being one of the greatest and most inspirational performers of all time. And then we got that infamous statement from Tupac, who was on the rise at this time.
What's your favorite rap song?
Ice Cube.
Okay, what's your favorite rap jam?
It's Yours. That's old. No one is gonna know that.
T.Y. Rock. Can't Touch This by MC Hammer.
Okay, and why do you like that one?
Because it's raging and he's funky. Funky dance steps.
I want to ask you, why do so many people get on Hammer? I mean, the man sold 10 million records.
I'm not getting on Hammer, and I'm not going to say he did sell 10 million records, but crack fiends bought 10 million rocks. That don't mean crack is good. That don't mean nothing. Selling records don't mean nothing. Like that. The reason, I'm down with him because he's a brother and he's making his mail. But, however, he's diluting rap. You know what I'm saying? He's playing that Sambo role, and the reason everybody's buying his record is because he's no threat, and everybody want to see Sambo dance.
Well, we obviously have some strong feelings here.
And this was the wrench in the track that just completely derailed MC Hammer. There was no coming back from this. MC Hammer was already one of the few, still putting out this type of hip hop. But once this statement was made, it was like marking the end of the foundation of hip hop. It was officially the end of those positive, uplifting lyrics to elevate you out of that negative state of mind. And now we're moving into reality rap, which ultimately just became more gangster rap. And of course, we know that Tupac would kind of lead the way of that. But it's so crazy considering how Tupac started as a background dancer for Digital Underground, dancing, smiling, having a good time. And he came out of performing arts school doing ballet. And even when he first got into rap, he was making songs that were political and, were speaking to those different social issues. But there was absolutely nothing gangsta about Tupac. This was a day and night transformation. And so many people that were around Tupac regularly have come out and said that this gangsta image that he was putting out there was not even close to who he really was.
I used to play in a place called Hollywood Athletic Club a lot. And that's where, I forgot how I first met Tupac, but Tupac and I would play, and we every now and then would meet up there. And what was interesting is that it felt like, from my perspective, it was a kind of a weird thing with Tupac. Like, we would play and people would say, your friend looks a lot like Tupac, but nobody ever thought it was him because the side of him that I knew was so different from what the whole gangster thing. Because I speak the way I speak, no matter who I'm with, right? And so people would be like, oh, that guy's not Tupac. Tupac's not that goofy. But then, like, we would be playing and all of a sudden he'd go back into, yeah, nigga, I'm like, somebody black must have walked into the room. Yep, there it is. Yep. It was kind of like he would turn that on and off. It was like, I say it's like, imagine if Al Pacino kept in Scarface mode for the purposes of other people around it.
Now, obviously, you mentioned it was a special time, and you had a special relationship with Tupac. Talk about that.
Yeah, man. Me and Pac had a great relationship. You know what's great about Pac? Everybody think he was like this thug, this gangster. First of all, he was too like he's a performing arts high school kid. Okay, Pac was very smart and he was very silly. He was a clown, and he wasn't a real gangster, but he act gangster, and he's method actor. So he went a little bit too far, and he's like, "Oh, I'll shoot you!" Pow! He really shoot you. Yeah. So he overcommit. But I could tell he wasn't a gangster because he had the softest hands you ever wanted to like touch on a man. Like, no gangster has hands like this hard.
He was moisturizing them.
No, it was like I call him a Palmolive thug. Like he put it, come here, you want some of this? And he just give you this gentle hand. It was soft, and then he had these long eyelashes, looked like Snuffleupagus. Just like, you don't want none of this. I'm a dog. But he sold the role, though. He did.
A lot of people tell me Tupac is, for the most part, a nice guy. This old thug thing, hype. Good for record sales. Helps him identify with the young people who are out there and angry, who would maybe label him a sellout, like they did Hammer, if he didn't have that hard side. What about that?
First of all, nobody could call me a sellout. I'm not going for that. I'm not even in that. I'm not looking for approval from the black community because we don't give approval. We don't really do nothing but exist. So it's not like black people could tell me you a sellout or you true blue.
I'm play devil's advocate again. Right. Critics say, yeah, but you're being pimped. You're being pimped by the record executives who will allow you to do your thug life because it portrays a certain black. I mean, you've heard it, that if you were just a singer, you wouldn't have the same record contracts you have. Right. But because you portray the thug life, the gangster rap, they've allowed you to make that money. They've allowed you to push and make you platinum.
I beg to differ. You know what I'm saying? I'm getting pimped. That's true. But just like how a woman would be, you know what I'm saying? Anybody to be pimped. It's like, it's not that you get pimped, it's how long you get pimped. You know what I'm saying? Because if you really look at this situation, it is not I who's being pimped. When you look at them white kids with Raiders hats on, it's the white folks getting pimped. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm making their future. I'm writing down their curriculum. Right now, what I write in my album today, when it comes out in 2 months, that's what white kids is doing. So who really is getting pimped? What I'm writing in my raps is what them white kids is gonna be saying to their mamas and daddies when they come home. Who is getting pimped?
It just seems like Tupac was placed into that position to help to continue to further push gangster rap into mainstream. And it's hard not to think that it's not something more than a coincidence that his very last album has him nailed to a cross. And he's pushed as the ultimate hip hop martyr who died as a thug. And, that legacy just continues to live on. While the people that really laid the foundation for hip hop have pretty much been completely forgotten, almost like they've been erased, which has ultimately erased those original 4 elements of hip hop. And now those 4 elements have become sex, money, guns, drugs, everything that NWA and 2 Live Crew originally ushered in, everything that the mainstream media was supposedly so against is now literally what mainstream hip hop is. And by the time we hit the mid 90s, the entire hip hop scene had been permeated with so much of this gangster rap that it was to the point that if you didn't have that hardcore gangsta element to your rap style, that your music wasn't even getting played. The entire hip hop scene just had this dark element to it from the mid 90s all the way up to the year 2000. Even the artists that were putting out that positive hip hop in the early 90s and 80s were trying to adapt to have more of a gangsta image. Even if their messages didn't change, it's like they were still forced to change their image just to survive in this gangsta rap dominated climate. But when it came down to it, it wasn't just your image. If your lyrics didn't have those gangsta elements, it was all about pushing this gangsta rap to the masses. We still had a few groups that would push through, like Arrested Development and a couple of others, but it was just never like it was in the past. Things did start to lighten up after the early 90s, but even when the music was just fun and party oriented, you could still see the effects of gangsta rap on all the music that came after it. It might be a song with a lighthearted beat, something made for the radio, made for the clubs. But then you look past the beat and actually listen to the lyrics, and they're still focusing in on all the same stuff that gangsta rap ushered in. Guns, drugs, disrespecting women, glorifying that materialistic mindset, putting the pursuit of money over pretty much everything, just over a less hardcore beat. Now you could actually dance to all that negativity. And we did have conscious hip hop in the mainstream around this time in the early to mid 2000s. Mos Def, Talib Kweli, Lauryn Hill, Common, The Roots, even Lupe Fiasco a little later on. But it just wasn't like that conscious hip hop of the 80s. In the 80s, you had this conscious hip hop where the only thing really separating this music from anything else was the message. This was music you could play at a club, at a party. And again, the only major difference was the lyrics and the message. But once we got into the 2000s, it was like that conscious music was being deliberately watered down. And you put it up against the other hip hop that was going mainstream at the time, that's sticking to the guns, drugs, violence. You're getting all these innovative, energetic tracks with these instrumentals that pull you in. But for the conscious hip hop, we're getting this low energy, mundane sound. Almost like they were trying to intentionally make those conscious messages less interesting, less enticing. And eventually it just got to the point where there was just no more conscious hip hop in the mainstream at all. We still had Nas, Kanye West, Wale, Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, but they were all coming, with that little bit of positivity and a whole lot of nonsense. They're giving you all these mixed messages. Nobody is standing firm on any higher principles, higher virtues, higher consciousness. The flow is good, but every other word is explicit, staying on that low vibration. And for the most part, there's nothing about what they're saying that's speaking to your higher self. There's not a whole lot about it that's separating it from the rest of the mainstream hip hop. And it's gotten to the point where what is dominating hip hop now is the guns, the drugs, that drill and trap hip hop, which is ushering in this culture of death. And they're telling you exactly how they're killing people and telling you exactly what drugs they're using and giving you the exact formula for how they're mixing the drugs. And again, you look into who is financially backing this and who is giving these artists a platform. And everything traces back to Sony, Warner, and Universal funding and financing this music. And because this is where the money's going, this is the type of hip hop that these major labels are financing. You now have all the independent artists flooding social media with more of the same type of hip hop because it seems like that's the way to get on, to get noticed by these major labels. And where hip-hop music is now all stems back to gangster rap being introduced in the 80s. And just by coincidence, we got the first private prison in 1984, which led into thousands of private prisons by the late 80s. And you can see the number of people entering prisons has continually increased from 1985 all the way to right now. Now, we already know that the prison industrial complex is one of the most lucrative businesses. But once the private prisons came into play in the 80s, you now had private investors who were financially invested in these prisons. And those investments depend on these prisons staying operational and staying filled. And these private companies that own these prisons are actually contracted out by the government. So these private companies are basically government contractors that have to meet certain guidelines laid out by the government in order to maintain ownership of these prisons. And a lot of these government contracts with these private prisons require a 90 to 100% occupancy rate, meaning that they need to have these prisons filled 90 to 100% with prisoners. So you got people whose investments literally depend on these prisons being operational and depend on them being filled to the max or near the max. So now the prison industrial complex has basically become like a service industry, because now we have that factor of supply and demand. And you got BlackRock and Vanguard, the two biggest investors in private prisons. It's about $200 billion invested into these private prisons between the two of these companies. So we're talking about more than 50% of investments into private prisons links back to these two companies. And then these two companies, BlackRock and Vanguard, also have billions of dollars invested into Sony, Warner, and Universal. So the same companies that are investing billions of dollars into these private prisons are also investing billions of dollars into these three major corporations that are financing gangsta rap and is now financing the trap and the drill music that pushes and promotes everything that leads people into the prisons. So it's like they knocked out two birds with one stone. You remove the positive, conscious hip hop from the mainstream, and then you feed people their own destruction while also financially benefiting off of it. They understood the power of the music and the influence it was having and the potential of where it was going. And they knew hip hop was not slowing down. So they flipped it and turned it against the masses. But as that shift in hip hop was happening, there was so many people that saw what was happening and were trying to fight against the shift in this music. You know, it wasn't just like everybody was accepting it. A lot of people saw right through this thing and were trying to call it out. Calvin Butts, C. Dolores Tucker, Dionne Warwick. We had a lot of people protesting the music, passionately protesting the music, to the point where they were even driving steamrollers over the top of gangster rap albums. And even when we still had local black radio stations, before radio was taken over by the major corporations, you had so many radio stations refusing to play gangster rap because they saw the writing on the wall. They saw that we were being fed our own destruction.
We will not stand for the vile, ugly, low, crime, abusive, and rough music.
I'm here because I'm outraged at the denigration of black women. And as a father, as a son, my mother, my sisters, our wives, our girlfriends have been denigrated, and these are against the values of our community.
Reverend Butts argues that he is not against all rap, just that which denigrates blacks through words and images. That rap, he says, casts a shadow on all blacks.
This is not a place, as one young woman stood up and said once, where I hear people being called bitches and whores around every corner and MFs. It's not. It's not like that in Oakland. It's not like that in LA. There is some of it, but the world must not understand that that is who we are. We are not that.
It is not all right for our black male children to grow up and be drug dealers, gang bashers, or stick-up kids. But your negative lyrics and videos are telling them that it's all right. Negative rap is a slap in our faces. It lets everybody know to a certain extent that we as black people must have low self-esteem, no respect for ourselves or anyone else, and we just don't care who we hurt as long as we're making the dollar.
Hopes that protests like these and the media coverage they generate will eventually make an impression on the rappers and cause them to change their negative vocabulary.
We're not saying that they can't make it. They have every right in the world to make it. What we're saying is that we hope to create a climate in our community that we believe once existed, where this kind of thing is so intolerable that people would dare not suggest that a black woman is a bitch or any woman is a female dog.
It's Triple the Music, BLS 107.5 in the company of John Robinson in the Midday Mix.
The leading black radio station in New York, WBLS, recently announced that it will not be playing music containing derogatory, profane, or violent lyrics. The station's general manager is Dave Lampel. I talked with him recently about his station's decision. Tell us why WBLS decided to take Gangsta Rap off the air.
The words, the way people were talking about women, talking about violence and using guns as a method of everyday life. And unfortunately, this was impregnated throughout a lot of the music that was coming out, even some of the most popular stuff. Artists who didn't have to do it were starting now to do this as a regular routine.
And was it some kind of studies you had seen, or was it discussions within the organization or reaction from the community? What motivated it?
People just got so frustrated with the fact that more and more records were coming out with this. Our choices as to what to play on the air and put on the air were fewer and fewer and fewer. And the feeling was, you know, since we had become a company that led the way in black ownership in broadcasting, we led the way on several important policy fights in Washington at the FCC and other areas, that it's time for us to also lead the way and issue a statement of policy about internally how we are going to deal with this onslaught of music, if you will, and also, more importantly, use this as kind of a bully pulpit to the industry to say, hey, look, we are a principal operator in this business and we want it to stop.
Is it because there's something you discern welling up in the community? We
got a lot of letters from listeners who would talk about what's on BET or on the videos and music television. We got critical about the kind of words to express some of the things in ways that we may not be so comfortable with. I'm not sure that it means that a public radio station like WBLS has to be the conveyor of that. I mean, people can buy this product, they can hear it, they can see it in a lot of other ways. We're not trying to say that the product should never be out there. We're simply saying we're not going to play the game of somehow implying that this is mass public appeal acceptable stuff, that the concept of calling somebody niggers and bitches and hoes and all these kinds of words are typical routine ways that people should be talking with one another. When I was a kid growing up in Harlem, to say something about your mother or to say something about your sister, just even if it was something halfway off the wall, would have gotten you slaughtered. Today we have people walking around calling women and putting their hands on women and degrading them and beating them and shooting them and all kinds of other things. And it's almost like this is a new factor in my community.
Is it more than just taking the music off of your air? Are you on a campaign? Are you lobbying other stations to follow your lead?
Lots of other stations have already gotten in touch with us. I mean, obviously, our chairman, Pierre Sutton, is president of the National Association of Black-Owned Broadcasters. That is an organization that at its next meeting, as they have at past meetings, will increase their stand on this. There are a lot of other black stations that have already stated policies of different types, and hopefully there will be a unity of all those policies. A lot of non-black stations have already contacted us to ask the details of how we're doing this and have subscribed personally themselves to the same policy. I think It's not a question of popularity. It's a question of right or wrong.
African American women particularly are tired of being called hoes, bitches, and sluts by our children who are paid to do this by Time Warner.
I am here to put the nation on notice that violence perpetuated against women through the music industry in the forms of gangster rap and misogynist lyrics will not be tolerated any longer. Principle must come before profit. A year ago, I established the National Political Congress of Black Women's Entertainment Commission, headed by Dionne Warwick, Melba Moore. Thus, images that degrade our dignity and are an insult to our children, our families, and communities concern us too. And that includes all this gangster rap and misogynist lyrics. Music that glorifies and promotes violence with guns, knives, or drugs, and denigrates and defames women. For 400 years, profit came before principle, as black women bore the brunt of slave masters' degradation. The spirit of black women and their families could not be broken. Today, however, through the lyrics of rappers who display no respect for women, no respect for families, and little respect for themselves, the souls of our sisters are being destroyed, and so too their progeny. All of us have watched as the industry have grown. We have watched not really knowing, not really understanding, not first realizing the damage that is inherent in what some thought were merely words. Now we see the direct and indirect effects. We see the rise in murders, in abuse, in batterings. We hear the wailing mothers, the grieving sisters, the tormented brothers and fathers and children planning their own funerals. We feel their hopelessness and helplessness, and we embrace their pain. Yet in the midst of these tragedies, others still want to argue about the First Amendment right to freedom of speech, a freedom they have embraced to call African American women hoes and bitches and sluts and even worse. As I see it, there are three things wrong with gangster rap and misogynist lyrics. It is obscene, it is obscene, it is obscene. In my view, it was never intended by the founding fathers of this nation that First Amendment rights were meant to protect obscenities. Obscenity has long been an exception to free speech. If the filth that is portrayed in these gangster rap videos and art is not obscene, then I submit that nothing is obscene. African American women have always been the protected nurturers of their homes, their families, and their communities. We march for our rights to Selma. I was there with Dr. King. We're beaten with billy clubs, and we're bitten with dogs unleashed by bull connors. We will not tolerate injustice and insults from our worst enemies then, and we sure ain't gonna accept insults from our youth now. I stand before you today with millions of my sisters to say that no one has the right to degrade, denigrate, dishonor, or disrespect African American women. No one has the right to poison our children's mind and destroy our African cultural heritage. That is why the women of NPCBW and our supporters will demonstrate. We'll go to jail again and again and again, just as we did when we demonstrated at the Wiz in December and Sam Goody yesterday. No one and no industry will be allowed to continue this social and psychological genocide of the women and girls of this nation. Stand before you today with the spirits of Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, and Mary McLeod Bethune to say this: we will defy any force that will disrespect us and our families, and I apologize, Mary, my good friend and founder.
Have you been disappointed that there have not been more members of the African American community, particularly leaders in the African American community, who've been willing to be on the front lines with you about rap music?
That has just, that has hurt me more than all that white folks have done to me. That has hurt me more because our people don't really understand the effect that this is going to have on our people. Because we're going to be gone, those of us who've been the fighters. And I'm glad you're recording this history, because all of us are going to be gone. Just like we didn't know about what took place in the latter part of the 18th century. You see, 1800s. That was all written out. That we had congresspersons, now we had legislators rather, writing the Constitution of the state Constitution of Georgia and South Carolina. They were there, legislating. We don't know about that. They wrote out, and our kids coming up in 2040 and 50 and 60 will not know about us. And they're going to wipe it away. And the kids, that's why they're recording it. All this music, that's all our kids will be hearing in 2020, 25 and 30 and 40. 2040 and 50, and they'll have to start fighting. Those who are knowledgeable now will have to start the whole civil rights movement again. Those who fail to learn the lessons of history are what? Doomed to repeat them.
People saw what was happening and they were trying to fight against it. The problem was all they could really do was protest. And there wasn't enough people willing to give up the music. So many people thought that they were just over exaggerating and they just couldn't see the bigger picture of where this thing was headed. And then you had the factor of a lot of rappers going after people like C. Dolores Tucker and other people who were fighting against this music, making it seem like they were attacking hip hop specifically, when in reality, it was always a fight against that negative hip hop, a fight specifically against gangster rap. But again, all they could do was protest. They didn't have the power to actually stop this music. They didn't own the record labels that were signing these artists, the distribution companies that were distributing the music, the television stations playing the music videos. And again, it got to a point where even radio was completely controlled by these major corporations. So there was really no way to stop this. And we see where it is now. Everything that they were establishing with gangster rap, with 2 Live Crew in the 80s has been fully integrated into hip hop culture. They have completely changed what hip hop is to what they probably always wanted it to be. And all of this stuff, the over exaggeration of the guns, the drugs, the pimp culture, it all stems back to black exploitation movies of the 1970s, back when there was a lot less roles for black people in Hollywood. And the majority of the roles that they could get were portraying these blaxploitation stereotypes, basically portraying all the worst aspects of the community. You know, the pimps, the prostitutes, the drug dealers, and putting these characterizations of black people on a pedestal and basically turning all these negative aspects of the community into the most prevalent image of the community, into these heroes, into these role models. And we see it's the same thing with hip hop today. The glorification of the pimps, the drug dealers, the prostitutes, every single negative aspect of the community placed on a pedestal. It's literally just a new form of black exploitation. And before those black exploitation movies, when black people had even less opportunities in Hollywood, we had the minstrel shows, which were designed to use music and entertainment to push all these negative stereotypes. And this all stems back to Jim Crow, which was an entire marketing campaign from the late 1800s all the way to 1950, designed to heavily enforce and push these stereotypes. And when you look at so much of the stuff from Jim Crow, it is so similar to the stuff we were getting from gangster rap and what we've been getting from hip hop ever since then. Again, it is like hip hop is the modern day Jim Crow. And, you know, a lot of times back then they would use blackface to portray these stereotypes. But it's like they just traded the blackface and are now just paying the actual people to portray and reinforce these stereotypes. I mean, you look at some of these videos of these rappers performing for radio executives, and it really does just look like a modern day minstrel. And the crazy part is that those thug, gangsta elements of this culture didn't even start with hip hop. You can go back and you can see where the roots of this started. You know, while Jim Crow was still going on, these were the original gangsters, the original thugs. This is who was toting the guns, pushing the drugs, and they have now flipped it through this thing called hip hop. and made this our culture. There's crime, there's violence everywhere in every part of the world, but they have found a way through this music to make those criminal aspects of the community the ultimate representation of the community as a whole and what Black culture is. And because they control the mainstream media, they've been able to push these images out to the world. It's another case where you can just see the power that hip hop has to influence people, because you can see those negative stereotypes being emulated by everybody. It's like they're using this music, using the power of hip hop to dumb down the masses. And you can see people falling victim to it everywhere. There is no denying the effects this music is having and what its purpose is, to poison the mind of the people listening to it. I mean, when you got rappers, the people that are recording the music, coming out and saying that they don't even allow their own children to listen to their music, you gotta know something is wrong with this music. Remember, we had Cardi B, one of the most popular rappers right now, who recently got called out for keeping her music away from her daughter, even though this music is being pushed out onto the rest of the world.
Cardi B is defending the fact that she does not let her 2-year-old daughter Culture listen to her music. A couple days ago, Rap TV tweeted a clip of Cardi's Instagram Live from August where she turns off her hit WAP after Culture comes into the room.
Oh yeah, kids are here. I forgot.
There are a ton of videos online, whether it be TikTok or whatever, where people love filming their little children singing the lyrics to WAP. And I think more fans should be like Cardi, where when the kid walked in the room, the song turned off because it wasn't funny. And it's not funny if that kid starts singing those lyrics, but a lot of people do find it funny. And I find it interesting that the artist of that song wound up being the adult in the room.
But again, we have no control over the industry. We can't stop what's being put out there. We don't control what's on the radio. We don't control what's in the mainstream. But what we do have control of is ourselves. And when it comes to protecting your mind, you are the number one line of defense for your own mind. And when it comes down to it, no matter what they're throwing at us through the mainstream, we have the power to just not make it a part of our reality, to not give it any attention, to not give it any energy. But I think it's definitely important to avoid this stuff at all costs because, you know, I can speak from experience. Being young, having that impressionable mind, not having a father figure or a strong male role model around, and being influenced heavily by this music, wanting to be a thug, wanting to be out in the streets, because this is what the music was telling me that a real man was, that a successful man was. And I wasn't conscious enough to see that this music was influencing me towards my own destruction. You know, I had to grow in wisdom and maturity to see it. And once I saw it, you know, once I started operating from a higher level of consciousness, I couldn't even listen to the first couple of lines of the music. The music just wasn't resonating with me at all anymore. And if you're trying to continue to grow and become the best version of yourself, you know, the majority of this music is designed to speak to your lower self, to that animalistic part of yourself, that part of you that's just concerned about survival, your basic instincts, keeping you focused on the material and not reaching for any higher levels of consciousness. And just with the way music infiltrates the brain without first being processed, just lets you know we should really be guarding what we're listening to. And once that music enters the auditory cortex and that music is finally processed, it gets processed within the cerebral cortex, inside the temporal lobe. And also sitting inside the temporal lobe is the pineal gland. And when you look at this area from outside the brain, it's referred to as the temple. So everything you listen to after making its way through the auditory cortex is embedding itself in your temple. And again, you are the number one line of defense for your own mind, for your own temple. For me personally, I don't listen to any mainstream hip hop, really any mainstream music, or should I say any current mainstream hip hop or mainstream music. I connect more to a lot of older music, going back to the 60s, 70s, 80s, early 90s. For me, the greatest music group of all time is Earth, Wind, and Fire. The greatest musicians of all time, in my personal opinion. And I listen to a little bit of everything. You know, I'm not really limited on what I listen to. You know, a lot of old school R&B, but then I like some old school progressive rock, you know, Kansas, Alan Parsons Project, Steely Dan. But then I'll curve all the way to, you know, artists like Enya, Sade, India Ari. And from time to time, I would listen to classical music because I have experienced the power that that music has to completely shift your mindset. I can be in a crazy mood, filled with anxiety, you know, just feeling crazy. And I could turn that classical music on and it just sets everything in order. But like I said, I'm all over the place musically. 80s freestyle, even down to the cheesy 80s stuff. And like I said, I do listen to old school hip hop, 80s, early 90s. But just like with any music that I listen to, I'm really particular about which artists I listen to and what songs I listen to. You know, it's got to resonate with where I'm at right now. It's got to resonate with me on a higher level. And one of the things that kind of goes unchecked with the old school hip hop of the past, I'm talking about going all the way back to Sugar Hill Gang, is that there's always been this counteractive mindset when it comes to male-female relationships. There's always been this level of disrespect of women and lack of sexual discipline that's kind of permeated hip hop music since the beginning. You'll very rarely, even when the music was at its best, find songs that promote sexual discipline and being 100% committed to one woman. You know, we had a few anomalies here and there. MC Shy D, I Don't Want to Treat You Wrong, Heavy D and the Boys, Dedicated, which was literally a song about staying dedicated in a relationship. And there are some others, you know, definitely a lot more than we have today. But there was a lot of that programming of, you know, spreading yourself around, throwing your seed everywhere, creating all these soul ties, exchanging all this energy, and just having no type of sexual discipline. I mean, even the artists that made the few songs about being in a relationship and sharing love with a woman still had these other songs that completely counteracted that message. So yeah, for me personally, I choose to stay away from that type of old school hip hop. It doesn't resonate with me personally. But yeah, man, I know this was a lengthy video. It was a lot to get into. I appreciate you for sticking through to the end. And the overall arcing message here is just to protect your mind, protect your temple, that higher version of yourself that connects you to things, you know, outside of all this. We got to be the number one line of defense for our own higher mind. And the only way to do that is to be conscious of what you're listening to, which means to be critical and to be analytical of everything that is entering your auditory cortex. And if you don't want it there, then don't make it part of your reality. Again, there is a clear war for our minds, and we have to be the number one line of defense against all that negative programming. And if you're striving to live a righteous, honorable life, it becomes that much easier because it'll be like trying to ingest something that you're allergic to. You'll just regurgitate it back up. Your system just will not allow you to take that in. But yeah, again, thanks for watching. This video will most definitely get a lot of copyright strikes, but it did take a ton of work. So, you know, if you feel so obliged, please support by donating. You know, if you haven't already, you can also purchase the Truth About Space series. I know I got a lot of people that are waiting on part 5, and that will be coming soon. That'll be the next thing that I drop. Probably expect to see that by like the middle of this year. It's going to take some time to put all that together, but it is coming. And I appreciate everybody for being patient. I really just wanted to make sure that I drop this on YouTube. The need to have this conversation has been sitting in me for a while, and I'm glad to have finally gotten it out. You know, once they gave 3 6 Mafia an Oscar for It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp, that was the ultimate sign that this thing was hijacked, that the mainstream hip hop was done. Even though they've been signaling for a while, you know, that the music has been hijacked. And then we see where it is now. You know, they're still throwing up the same signs, and the music is getting even worse. It's an even more deliberate attack on the mind of the listener. But until next time, peace, love, and stay up.
Here we go. Come on. Yeah. Here we go. The word is out. Kumo D's in the house again. Here we go. And here we go again. Here we go. And word has it, the brothers esoteric now is just a little too deep for the fans. So we gonna come this time with a simplified rhyme. Check it out.
Around and around and around we go. People coming to the damn to hear me flow. The live lyricist is hearing this soul. I got a funky beat to let you know. Only real brothers wanna hear real rhymes. Other suckers want a nickel and dime. Candy coated, sugar coated, bubblegum rap. Long as it's moving on a funky track. My vocabulary's over their head. They can't understand a word I said. So I gotta come with a watered down sound. Remedial adjectives, verbs, and nouns. Party people in the party only wanna dance. It's hard to rock a party when you're lyrically advanced. I tone down the lyrics, suppress ego. Got a funky rhythm, now watch me go.
Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. 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 Here we go. Here we go. Come on. Here we go.
Go with the flow? No, no, no. I am the brother that sets tempo. Intelligent, relevant, eloquent speaking. You do the dancing, I'll do the freaking. Some people wanna dance, some people wanna listen. Some people at the party only wanna hear the dissing. My versatile styles, I'm able to adapt. You know I'm talking, cause I'm all that. I drop science for the brothers on the street. Intellects get it, and others want to be the way they feel. I could be erased. All they want is you to pump that bass. Rather than trying to change the times, they would rather me change my rhymes. A positive brother, yeah, we know. But they would rather just watch me go.
Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go again.
I am a brother, young, gifted, and black. There's no need for the profane rap. I'm lyrically potent, very well versed. Some rappers can't rap and try to hide it with the curse. Money in the pocket, gold around the neck, rings on every finger, booming system in effect. Trying to imitate, or better emulate. I can relate, but I'd rather innovate. Like the creator, I love to create peace and love, conquering hate. I got a date with fate to be known as a great. So all you sissies, all suckers can wait. Become irate while the ladies gyrate. Infatuate, lust in me, mental states compensate. If I get too deep, then you won't relate. So now I gotta tone down the sound, cause I can pick the beat up and turn it around. Turn any jam to a political party. Raise your conscience and rock your body. If you can't relate, just clap your hands. Listen to the rhythm and do your dance. And I'll just party with the alter ego. Rock a body, 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 body. Here we go.
Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Come on. Here we go. Here we go. Come on. 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 Here we go again. Yeah. So here we go again. Here we go again. On and on and on. Kumo D. Here we go again. 1991. Much damage will be done. Here we go again. Here we go
basement. The first floor's a boy, so I'll rise. Don't wanna make it to the top too quickly, so I take step to step floor at a time. Take a look at the flow of the future. If you can't shake to it, then it don't suit ya. Break off, back off, before I bust off. Bad is the worst, some are bad ones. So bad this, bad that, who's bad enough? But those who are bad, then batter up. I pointed the scrap with my index. Who couldn't come off with a rag and some Windex? I'm stepping the step, try to meet me there. I'm avoiding all political fanfare. If you're down, take a pound and put your fist up for the sound of the nature of a sister. Who's a king, who's a queen, who's trying to bang? I see myself as a queen, but it ain't for rank. It's for all, not one, not for income, but for knowing who and where we descend from. I can't cope with a joke, I come crazy new. They call me Mama Zulu, but I won't baby you. I'm not the type to look for a man with cash, but the only thing you get if you're broke's a cash. Stop, dip, then switch. What floor is this? I go higher than a fire, try to diss. This is a little of my headed for top style. Ripping tracks, whipping, in fact, is that wild? Ride on, flow, a few floors to go. I see sweets instead of concrete. So, if you're down, take a pound and pump your fist up for the sound of the nature of a sister. Here's a knick-knack, sit back, hold your hat. Here's a thick rap, you got close, now get back. I got an army busting through the enemy's wall. My thoughts on the situation was more. Salt and pepper said it was time to throw. So me and Spin did him in, now time to go. Yo-yo grabbed him, he said, hey, diddle diddle. While I and Nicky got only out of the middle. Sisters in action, strong, real, still complete. I say what up, cause you can't come or compete. The lock, the T-bar booms like a speaker. I hold my soul in a sneaker. Don't ask if I'm fast, I come swift, sis. Cause I'm faster than ass if you're with this. If you're down, take a pound and pump your fist up for the sound of the nature of a sister.
What else? Smash them and beat them in a little small particles. You'll realize that I'm here to do away with negativity and story. This is the topic. What? The devil, Satan, or better yet, 3 times 2. I got a question. I just got to know. Does it equal you? Conniving on devils. Devils are sneakish. I'm a rebel. When I appear, they get weakish. I'ma drop drinks no matter what some think. You'll hear a crash on the floor soon as the punk wings. I spot them by the ways and actions. I do the knowledge. I catch him and start taxing. They show you pictures of him. It's not him. They conceal this. You don't know you're living amongst them. They tell you that heaven is in the sky. Hell is underground. Come on now. Open your eye. You're a snake. You do dirt. Some stray away. For what I say, cause the truth hurts. But I'ma keep dropping bombs. Making hip-hop a swarm. They're full of tricks, so don't pass them. You come across a 666, they smash them. Coming on shapes, forms, and fashions. Rebels, created for the purpose of simply smashing devils. Someone that I can't stand with a passion. Levels are set, I'm a definite threat. I find me a devil, I smash him. So listen as I speak. Open your eyes and get wise while I teach. Some people don't like what I write, thinking all take a hike is the youth I reach. Dumb sleepy devils attack. Some devils are white, some devils are black. Nevertheless, they're all sorts of meanings. Some of us think of him as a sort of demon. Some call him Satan, some call him Lucifer. I'm not scared, I'm prepared to tell the truth to you. My meaning of the devil is war. He's nothing but a bloodsucker of the poor. I push lyrics, you don't know how to push. I'm quite serious, far from sourpuss. Ready to roll, hands above your head. You make one move, you're dead. This is a land undeceived by lyrical militant force. A rougher breed, a terrorist, lyrical terrorist. I advise you, what? To never diss. See, I never miss. When I aim, devils wish they never came. Cause I smash it. fix the beat, just bring the cuts. I'll bring the rhymes to get praised like King Tut. It's no wonder my people get beaten and treated unequal. Devils are made for devil missions. They've been doing it since they existed. Made to take over, bruise and make lower class of another man, and it stands that they rule the country. 10% of them. I felt it was time to make a rhyme to get at him. I laid him out on an open plain, then found that his brain was a bit strange. What a difference between them and us, but they still try to put it into us. It won't work, cause I'm a renegade of the 90s stage, and I'm into what goes on in my community. I strive for peace and unity, although some can help, they choose to be greedy and refuse to help the needy. But I'ma fight this with a righteous format and use the devil like a doormat. They're full of tricks, so don't pass when you come across the 666 to smash.
So, you're a philosopher?
Yes. 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 Yes.
I think very deeply. I think very deeply. I think very deeply. I think very deeply.
In about 4 seconds, a teacher will begin to speak.
I think very deeply.
Let us begin. What, where, why, or when will all be explained like instructions to a game. See, I'm not insane. In fact, I'm kind of rational. When I be asking you, who is more dramatic, this one or that one, the white one or the black one? Black the pumpkin, I'll jump up to attack one. Terrorist one is just the guy to lead a crew. Right up to your face and diss you. Everyone saw me on the last album cover, holding a pistol, something far from a lover. Beside my brother, S-C-O-T-T. I just laugh, cause no one can defeat me. This is lecture number 2, my philosophy. Number 1 was poetry, you know it's me. You know it's my philosophy, many artists gotta learn. I'm not flammable, I don't burn. So please stop burning and learn to earn respect, cause that's just what K.R. collects. See, what do you expect when you rhyme like a soft punk? You walk down the street and get jumped. You got to have style and learn to be original. And everybody's gonna wanna diss you. Like me, we stood up for the South Bronx, and every sucker MC had a response. You think we care? I know that they are on the tip. My posse from the Bronx is thick. In real life, we roll correctly. A lot of suckers would like to forget me, but they can't. Cause like a champ, I have got a record of knocking out the frauds in a second. On the mic, I believe that you should get loose. I haven't come to tell you I got juice. I just produce, create, innovate on a higher level. I'll be back, but for now, just sackle.
Did you hear the main thing that was just said?
In about 4 seconds, a teacher will begin to speak. I played the 9 and you played the target. You all know my name, so I guess I'll just start it. Or should I say start this? I'm the artist, and new concepts that they're hardest. Yo, cause I'm a teacher and Scott is a scholar. It ain't about money, cause we all make dollars. That's why I walk with my head up. When I hear whack rhymes, I get fed up. Rappers like a setup, a lot of games, a lot of suckers with colorful names. I'm so-and-so, I'm this, I'm that, but they all just wick, whack. I'm not white or red or black, I'm brown. From the boogie down, productions, of course, our music be thumping. Others say they're bad, but they're bugging. Let me tell you something now about hip-hop, about D-Nice, Melody, and Scott LaRock. I get a pen, a pencil, a marker. Mainly what I write is for the average New Yorker. Some MCs be talking and talking, trying to show how black people are walking. But I don't walk this way to portray or reinforce
it lacks creativity and intelligence, but they don't care because their company's selling it. It's my philosophy on the industry. Don't bother dissing me or even wishing we soften, dilute, or commercialize all the lyrics, because it's about time one of y'all hear it and hear it firsthand from an intelligent brown man. A vegetarian, no goat or ham or chicken or turkey or hamburger, because to me that's suicide, self-murder. Let us get back to what we call hip-hop and what it meant to DJ Scott LaRock.
You're a philosopher? Yes, I think very deeply.
In about 4 seconds, a teacher will begin to speak. How many MCs must get dissed before somebody says don't with Chris? This is just one style out of many. Like a piggy bank, this is one penny. My brother's name is Kenny. That's Kenny Parker. My other brother, ICU, is much darker. Boogie Down Productions is made up of teachers. The lecture is conducted from the mic to the speaker. Who gets weaker, the king or the teacher? It's not about a salary, it's all about reality. Teachers teach and do the world good. Kings just rule and most are never understood. If you were to rule or govern a certain industry, all inside this room right now would be in misery. No one would get along nor sing a song, cause everyone be singing for the king. Am I wrong? Am I wrong? I say, yo, what's up? It's me again. Scott LaRock, KRS, BDP again. Many people had the nerve to think that we would end the trend with criminal-minded and minded. Just only 10 funky hit records. No more than 4 minutes and some seconds. The competition checks and checks and keeps checking. They take the album, take it home and start sweating. Why? Well, it's simple. To them, it's kind of vital. To take KRS one's title.
Tempo quickly and swiftly, it's showtime. Ayo, here's your ticket, boss. The hot top fade is gonna kick it off. Whiz cuts, invincible, produce it. They wanted to know if the kid can get loose and tiptoe on the beat like a tightrope. Goes with high hopes, get stuck, and they might choke suckers. You know they're on a mission. Rhymes cut like X-ray vision, man. Just listen to the competition stumbling as the bass starts rumbling. MC's reps start crumbling to pieces. So feel the beat, heard releases outside the hotel. Line up teasers, no need to rehearse. Kid and play coming in first with a bang, a blast, and a burst of energy. 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 Plays on the mic, you're asking, will I rock? Feel the force of 10,000 kilowatts of pumping MC power. Turn on the faucet, cause it's gonna shower. How a man like me got so hyped, you wanna know. Stick around, dope rhymes are gonna flow from play. Not a player, a rhyme sayer. May I? No, I'm the mayor. Ready to use your rep as a doormat. Unless you get hip to the kid and play format. It's intricate and it will hit a new height. Then you find out why we're just too hype and just right for each and every occasion. When I step to the stage and drop wise words, don't play a brother close. In the meantime, here's another dose of energy. 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 Large or small, short or tall, y'all. When I throw the switch, out goes the call. Come on, come all to the place to be. Admission to the fun house is absolutely free. So wannabes can get a little energy, but step to me, nah, that's a fantasy. A little bit like Alice in Wonderland. Didn't you know? Invincible run the land, making the competition say uncle. The beat's so hard it bucks like a bronco, but I'm gonna ride it just like a cowboy would. Think you can? Hell yeah, I could. Kicking the most hyped up sounds you heard. Never follow another man, only these words. Walk with your friends, but step to your enemy and make it last with a mega blast of energy. 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 Energy.
the darkness. I'm glad that I can take part in this, and I'm hoping that you just might get together and search for the light. Finding the light means happiness. It's the best and nothing less, so I'm waiting at the end of the tunnel where happiness comes in bundles, but it takes time to get to the light, to get in the light, to be with the light. And I'm hoping that you just might get together and search for the light. How you get there is the question. Honesty is my suggestion. But first you must be awakened. If you say you are, you're faking. One who has seen the light doesn't have to prove that they've been moved. They just let it be, let it rest. For that is the mental test. Within this there's so much happiness, sorta like lasting moments of bliss. Everyone wants to be so happy. Let me explain my theory. Some type of grief you must experience in order to appreciate happiness. Cause if you are always satisfied, life will just pass by. You would have never tried to get to the light, to get in the light, to be with the light, to go see the light. And I'm hoping that you just might get together and search for the light. Ready, the light can be blinding and not worth finding. So for this you must prepare. Stay awake, wake up, stay aware. There are so many distractions. Those that see the light, just a fraction. Those that don't remain blinded. The light is there, they can't find it. One by one they fall in the darkness. And it's sad to take part in this, but I'm hoping that you just might get together and search for the light. Now finding the light is what's so difficult, and you can bet that the results are splendorous, wonderful, yeah. What wouldn't you do? Cause once you've seen the light, been with the light, got to the light, got in the light, I know that you just might never ever wanna leave the light.
The duo's back, competition, check out the new style. Then get the heck out, put on your battling gear, but don't come strapped. Bullets are not needed, this time it's rap for rap. I'm making a movie soon, you have to make your stack. In fact, in front of the rhyme, dance Jack, you getting it smacked. So wake up, because the time you took up, you gotta make up. It's time to break up the party, now you shook up. Salt and Pepper's getting swift with an up to par. Rap competition hiding while suckers are riding a broad strap. Herbie's on the beat, CDO has a musical note. Cinderella's like a propeller, spinning music so dope, making a lot of noise for all the boys shooting the gift. Hold on tight, cause tonight Salt and Pepper's getting swift. You might have thought about going against the spices. Salt and pepper's a mixture like Chinese rices. Battling time, Mr. Macho, please don't try to rip it, cause I'm not your like nacho cheese. You want flavor? Well, here's something to savor. Why don't you wave a microphone in front of my face and do a small favor? Give me a beat so I can bust a rhyme for all the nerds. Let all the words feed your mind. Stay in the days I'm pleasing, taking a rest, I'm not for easing. Bodily functions making them dance and prance. This is prison season, this is duck season, and I'm getting hot. You're out of luck, duck. Now it's time for you to get got. The ebony queens are back on the scene. I assume you still suck like a vacuum machine. Cornball sucker, give me a break. I'ma drop you from the sky like snow. Now you a cornflake born to break. Any sucker or half stepper who wants to get assaulted with a deadly pepper. Go down, low down, this ain't no showdown, but competition, I'm sure to blow down. Even if you seem to stand stiff, the breeze of the rhyme makes you move when we get swift. It seems you're lost in time to put up to, cause you just forced it. The furious females too fly to threads, a musical score lead. Need a victory, I left an S on your forehead. Don't freeze up now, it's time to put out lights. I won't ease up, pal, cause I'm a good out of sight. Lyrical queen, mess around and you get cream. The star of every male's fantasy or dream. The ebony princess in a lyrical safari. Battling me is like a Honda racing a Ferrari. If you were the king, what laws would you have me obey? None, my son, cause I'm quicker than a cabriolet. Quick to stick the chick trying to get slick. You're nothing but a turning a new trick, little miss. My mind is a trench that you dropped and you stopped in your tracks. And as I clench my fist, I twist words you use to rip. The next time you flex, I'm guaranteed to get swift. Rap artists and rhyme fanatics. Can you believe there's a sucker trying to cause static? Break out the health supplies and medical aid. Prepare your mind for a super alphabetical raid. Rhythmic explosion without corrosion. Rhymes in effect that protect like a Trojan against disease, sorta like a whack MC. Rhymes more powerful than the punch of Jack Dempsey. I fear no one, plus I tell no tales. I will stand up to any male or female. Punks who persist to resist end up a prisoner. Hissed in a daze or a phase because he is in a state of shock. Too hard for one to take, so in a multitude of crowds I run to break beats for torture. But don't get played, I stay paid, I caught you, now you shiver afraid. Scared of the fact we came back to uplift the name, redesign the game, and we get swift.
Word 360 degrees of subliminal, fortified with 144 minerals, 4 elements and 4 seasons, 4 corners of the world, it's all even. Mother Nature and Father Time align with the 9 planets and combine to influence the mind and control the whole system. Knowledge ain't enough, you need funky, funky wisdom. Wisdom.
The Midlands and clean the chitlins, given a new name, new religion. No freedom to vote, not even to make a decision. I saw my people sold, raped, and took out the rest of that stuff that Alex Haley talks about. They said I'm not from Asia, I'm from Africa, and all the blacks there now are just scavengers. That's the way my mind was poisoned to believe that in America blacks are inferior. A weak mind and a body of swine only adds up to being deaf, dumb, and blind. Illiterate to who, where, what, and why. So I ask myself, who am I? A native New Yorker on the streets, known for rocking rhymes to real rough beats that I found in the attic, noisy with static, the sound that made me a hip-hop fanatic. I made a few songs that sold okay, never top 20 or plenty airplay. I came Came out hardcore flexing, cock diesel. Saw a little cash and pop goes the weasel. I had to make that change and rearrange my whole rap format, no hardcore rap. So now all the pop charts I rule over new kids on the block and Paula Abdul. I thought I made it, then my song faded, and none of the black stations ever had played it. I tried to blame it on MTV and say, damn, they cold-played me for Young MC. But when you get down to it, I'm the real blame, because I wanted the fame. Money is not only the root of all evil, it's also the destruction of black people. So, conjunction, junction, what's your function? Being a scout or selling out? Look in the mirror at yourself eye to eye and say, who am I?
Hit the notification button and you'll get updated as soon as a new video drops.